be 30 minutes behind, so.
Okay. But
hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's episode of Talking Elite, episode 56. We're just running through these episodes. It's crazy. But tonight we are starting our first episode on the coverage of WrestleMania history. I figured since it is the WrestleMania season, and obviously there was a press conference tonight. I believe Amer watched it tonight, but some of us missed it. But yes, it is WrestleMania season right now. And for that, I want to get everybody a little bit geared up about the history of WrestleMania, because it's something I grew up with in my childhood. Amer as well grew up with WrestleMania, and Siren's a newbie to the old school WrestleMania. So she's here to basically talk about WrestleMania 1 and then learn a history about the rest. But we're going to have a fun conversation. Quick side note, Connor will be joining us tonight. He's just going to be a little bit behind. So we're going to be starting off with us three. And obviously, let me introduce you guys to the panel tonight, starting with a very awesome Twitch streamer that she is. She does gaming. She does everything. She does pro wrestling. She's one of our favorite new people, part of the team, and is part of Team Canada. Please welcome Siren. Siren, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. Mr. John Moxley here really wants some attention, though.
All right. Well, make sure he doesn't bleed.
Yeah, we try not to every day, but he's just,
Right. Well, we're glad to have you. And also joining us tonight, another new member of our team. And it's crazy because I'm in a Canadian sandwich right now, but he is joining us all the way from Toronto. He's got a lot of great insight. I know him and I are going to have great conversations about the history of these WrestleManias. But please welcome one of our very new team members and new team member to AEZ Canada, Mr. Amer. Amer, how you doing tonight, bud?
Doing well, thank you.
Well, that's great, man. So, I got my water. I got my hat. I'm ready to go. Thank you guys for all tuning in and joining us on this adventure as we gear up to get ready for WrestleMania 40. And I can't believe I'm saying WrestleMania 40. It is so bizarre that it's been that many WrestleManias that they've had. Amer, I guess I'll start with you, buddy. What was the very first WrestleMania you remember watching as a kid?
WrestleMania 1.
Yep. Okay, there you go.
I lived in, I was actually born in Toronto. We moved to a smaller city called Peterborough that's about an hour and a half away because my dad got a job there. But most of our family and friends were in Toronto, so we'd come back like pretty much every weekend. And, once I got into wrestling with the whole Hulkamania thing, my friend Arif and I we'd get together on weekends, and, his mom or my mom would rent us Coliseum videos, And WrestleMania 1, at the time, it was just WrestleMania, and we were just like, "This is awesome, dude!" That's exactly how it went.
Yeah, Siren, I know you're brand new to a lot of the newer kind of age pro wrestling, but do you remember which WrestleMania you remember seeing for the first time?
I don't know. I was probably 5, so whatever came out in 95.
That would be WrestleMania 11.
There you go, because they were on the TV every year at my house. So that
Lawrence Taylor against Bam Bam Bigelow. We'll get there.
I like Bam Bam Bigelow.
Yeah, I like Bam Bam Bigelow too. Yeah. Adam, I just realized something. My daughter just told me something. You guys talk amongst yourselves. I need 2 minutes. I'll be right back. I apologize.
Awesome. Yep. Well, to answer my question, my own question, I think the first WrestleMania I remember seeing ever was actually WrestleMania 6 in 1990. I was 3 years old, but we had it on TV and everything like that. And I remember just seeing Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan in the main event. And that's kind of where I fell in love with pro wrestling, just because it was bigger than life. And obviously, kind of growing up, I tried to watch every WrestleMania every year. Just because it was a big spectacle. And that's pretty much all we had was WWF, now WWE. Growing up, obviously in the later years when you had the Monday Night Wars, you got to WCW. But now the biggest spectacle is WrestleMania. But now you got other promotions doing big pay-per-views and doing big shows, which is always fun to watch. And but those were some of the earlier WrestleManias I remember. Was WrestleMania 6 was my very first one. And again, I fell in love with it, pro wrestling there. And growing up, just watching all pro wrestling. But again, every year it's always WrestleMania season. You always focus on that. And obviously, we got a lot of them to cover these next few weeks. But to give everyone perspective of what we're doing the next couple of weeks, because I know we're an all elite zone podcast. We're named after All Elite Wrestling because that's our baby. You know, that's the pro wrestling we're watching nowadays. We will get back to that. We'll probably bring in snippets here and there during the weeks, during these shows about our coverage for AEW as well. But I really want to gear everybody up for WrestleMania because it is a big time of the year, every year in pro wrestling. It seems to be a big hot topic.
I'm back.
You know, you're going to come April. So what we're doing weekly is we're doing 5 WrestleManias in one episode. So this week we are starting with WrestleManias 1 through 5. And so we're going to start off real quick with WrestleMania 1. Now, WrestleMania 1, it was in 1985. It premiered in Madison Square Garden. That's where they hosted the event. Madison Square Garden, the biggest sports venue in the world during those times where everybody wanted to go to Madison Square Garden to do everything, whether it was a concert or a sporting event. That was the locale to go. It was the daddy of all venues. And so the card itself had about 9 matches, which is what we usually see nowadays in WrestleMania history. I guess the first question I'm going to stick out to you guys. Obviously, we're going to go over the cards and everything, but what stuck out the most to you while going back and watching WrestleMania 1? Amer, what stuck out to you on that pay-per-view?
I'm refreshing my memory by looking at the card. And to me, when I think back to that WrestleMania, I'm remembering the Andre the Giant most of all. He's my mom's favorite wrestler, and that moment, just to see Andre come out and the way that they made him look larger than life to me. I go back and I watch that sometimes with my mom because, you know, she's at the point in her life where, you know, she's not getting senile yet, but she's very forgetful, right? I think she's at that prevalent stage. And it's interesting because it's almost like watching like with a child, you know, like she just doesn't remember things. Like, and when she goes back and sees that, oh, gee, I sure hope Andre wins. I'm like, this was like 40 years ago. It's already in the books. But that moment is really special to me when he wins, when he body slams Big John Studd and, you know, throws money around. Like I love that moment going back and watching that on WrestleMania 1.
Yeah, and obviously Andre the Giant being such a spectacle attraction in pro wrestling back then, you know, guy from the Swiss Alps as they build him from, even though he's French, you know, I think it's the French Alps, you know, so it's like that guy's huge. I mean, he was huge at 17. I mean, if you've watched the documentary about him, everything like that, you'd see how he kind of came along and kind of how he just was a big guy and they used him in pro wrestling. It's amazing. Before we move on to Siren, we got someone else joining us tonight. Sorry for the delay, Brandon. Connor's kind of in control of a lot of things right now since my hands are off of this. But joining us, another person that I love having conversations with about the history of pro wrestling, our good friend, Brandon. Brandon, welcome, bud.
I think you're muted. Brandon, you're muted.
I don't think he's muted. I think he's
no, I didn't say I'm muted.
Yep.
But...
There we go.
Now you got it. There you go.
Awesome. Technical difficulties.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us, Brandon. How you doing tonight, bud? I think he's trying to figure this out.
Yeah,
hold on. Now I can't hear y'all. Y'all keep talking. I'll be back with you in a second.
Okay.
Sounds wonderful.
So, all right. Well, Brandon will be right back. So, Siren, what's something, I know you just watched WrestleMania 1, like for the first time.
Yeah.
So it's like, what did you take away from that, from the early days of the first WrestleMania? What did you take away from that pay-per-view?
It was okay. Well, the wrestling was very technically awesome. Like I thought it was gonna be. Well, I didn't think it was gonna be that crisp. I'm not gonna lie to you. I had this like image in my head of like, they may have perfected things over time, but I don't think that is true at all. Anymore. Anyway, going back. I will say that the body slam challenge was definitely one thing that stood out to me because I was like, did people really think that he was not going to be able to lift that man? Like, was that a thing? Like, was that a thing that Andre wasn't going to be able to do that? Like, or that people weren't going to be able to do that? I don't know. Cause like, I just look at him and I'm like, oh yeah, he could do that. And the Junkyard and Greg the Hammer Valentine was probably my favorite match just because I didn't know that was going to end in the count out the way that it did. And I was like, hey, what the hell? And that was really cool. So I was really shook and I liked that. And the women's match was actually wasn't awful either, which is really cool because again, I thought it was going to be super tacky and awful and it wasn't, which was great. I mean, you definitely don't see the same kind of stuff that you see with ladies nowadays. They're definitely a little bit more toned down for sure, but it wasn't what I thought it was going to be at all, which was really refreshing. So I loved it. I thought it was a really great experience. All in all, seeing Mr. T was hilarious just because like I grow up and I think of like the people making fun of like Mr. T because I don't know. He wasn't a serious person in my generation. It was like the kind of meme joke kind of person. And I to see him portrayed as like strong, like, and not just like the joke meme that a lot of people my age perceive him as. I don't know. It was really cool because I always knew that he was like wrestling and all that stuff. I always knew, but I never watched it myself. And it was really neat to see. So
yeah, no, I think a lot of stuff stuck out to me for that first WrestleMania. Obviously the whole $15,000 reward if Andre can, body slam Big John Studd, which was the big thing. And another one was the whole upset of Iron Sheik and Volkov winning the tag titles in a dirty way. Obviously, another match that I really think was underrated was Steamboat versus Matt Bourne. Not the Matt Bourne we know now is like Matt Sydal, but no, Matt Bourne, the original Doink the Clown, went by Matt Bourne originally before he donned that character. I thought that match was underrated. I felt like it could have been a lot longer. I feel like it could have went, but then obviously another match that I thoroughly enjoyed that was probably one of the longest ones on the card was Brutus Beefcake versus David Sammartino. Obviously, Sammartino, the son of the legendary Bruno Sammartino, one of the longest reigning world champions in wrestling history. I think that match actually stuck out to me too because it was just so good and physical about how both those guys was, and this was early day Brutus Beefcake. Like this was early, like, hey, I'm a technical wrestler. I'm not this gimmick guy where I own a barbershop. No, I'm gonna wrestle you. So I thoroughly enjoyed that. Now going over just most of the stuff on that, this pay-per-view being the very first WrestleMania had the spectacle of spectacles, and everybody calling it the grandest show of all, and the funny thing is the early days of commentary. I want to talk about commentary because people bash commentary in pro wrestling. They're like, oh, they're following a script. Yeah, but sometimes they make it sound natural. And this whole pay-per-view, these early pay-per-views with Jesse the Body Ventura and Gorilla Monsoon on commentary during these pay-per-views, it felt natural. They had the script, but it felt natural just because they would stumble over words and nobody cared.
They didn't have a script.
No.
I can tell you that right now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, obviously. They were just told, go out there, just talk about the match. That's it, and
Siren really wants to say something.
Yeah, no, Siren, what's your take on the commentary during those early days?
I actually really enjoyed it. Is the executioner Greg the Hammer Valentine in that?
No.
I'm just curious. Okay, because they call him that once on commentary, and I was like, I don't know who this person actually is because they say that he's not the actual executioner, but a executioner. So I was really confused. So I had to ask once you brought up commentary because I just remembered that. And then the dude in the back, buddy in the back, your Lexi Nair guy,
Gene Okerlund.
Yeah.
No, not Gene
No,
Okerlund.
I know the
Gene
British
Okerlund.
guy.
He was awful.
Lord Alfred Hayes.
He was absolutely atrocious. I am watching him read like this the whole time. So when you were talking about reading off scripts and making it look natural, that guy does not have that.
No,
he does not have that ability. No. He does not have that ability at all.
Alfred Hayes is better in the studio. Yeah.
He was brutal. They were like, we need a guy with an accent. Like, and like that was it. But yeah, no, the commentary was really cool. I had to ask that question because I don't know if it was just a stumble or if there was like something that I was missing. So thank you.
Yeah, Aimer. I mean, we think about that. Let's talk about that. Like the early days of backstage interviews like that, and bringing someone on like Lord Alfred Hayes. Like it's unbelievable how that's changed over the years. Well, I mean, what's your take on that from WrestleMania 1?
Oh, gosh, I've actually thought about this issue a lot about how, back at that time, the generic wrestler would have to work on their promos. They would have to sell themselves. They'd have to sell their character to the audience, right? It was a skill that they had to develop. Nowadays, with the scripting, I'm kind of two minds about the scripting nowadays. I get it. I understand exactly why they do it. My understanding is that some of the performers, they almost kind of demand scripts. Yeah, I just want to go out and wrestle. If you want me to say something, write it all down for me, and I'll try and do it the best I can. But again, the need to sell your character isn't the way that it was. But in those days, you had to do it, right? Otherwise, you weren't going to get booked. You weren't going to make money. And guys learn. And the other side of that coin is WrestleMania 1 was Vince McMahon's huge risk, right? He risked it all on this, the sink or swim, right? And it highlights to me that now, all companies, not just WWE, of course, now they're so huge, but all wrestling companies seem to be so risk averse. Maybe it's a whole world, maybe it's a whole business world, right? We don't want a guy going out there live and flubbing lines. It's going to look horrible, right? But that's what they did back in the day. Just go out and do it. You flub a line, who cares? Come on, the show must go on. And it wasn't a big deal, and guys got better because of it, right? That's what really strikes me watching these old WrestleManias.
I will say that the promo work was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, because these guys had to do it. You had to do it or you didn't eat. Right?
The best thing was you'd see Jimmy, and he's supposed to be the mouthpiece, but he'd come out with somebody who has, in my opinion, much better mic skills than some of the people that come out nowadays that don't need a mouthpiece. So I'm like, I don't know. He came out with King Kong Bundy. I thought that King Kong Bundy's promo was not awful. Like, I have definitely seen people cut worse promos nowadays and not have a mouthpiece like Jimmy with them. Like, it was very odd. I was like, this is so strange.
Because people today are not being themselves, right? A guy like a King Kong Bundy, he wasn't a great promo by any stretch of the imagination, but he was out there and being himself. Right?
Yes,
and a manager at that time was more of a heat magnet with the crowd. Go around to the people at ringside and be loud and be boisterous, whatever, and get them to hate your guy. It wasn't really so much about being the mouthpiece in most cases.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, because they all had phenomenal promo work from what I watched.
Well, compared to today, there's no comparison. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the one thing you notice about those old WrestleManias before, where they do the promos backstage. But those are pre-recorded.
Yes.
So they have to go over that. Like, not now. Like, now they do it live. They do the script before the show, and they're like, this is what we're doing. This is the scene. Bam. When we go backstage, this is what you're saying. Like, it's there, and it's live on TV. They don't pre-record it. If you've watched, you watch the movie The Iron Claw about the Von Erichs and that scene of, Kevin doing the backstage promo, and he keeps messing up. Yeah. And his brother just keeps making fun of him. It's like, dude, it's not easy. You do this. We got to like, that's exactly how they did it back then. They had to do it backstage before the pay-per-view. So moving on, we're going to do this real quick before moving on to WrestleMania 2. My question for each of you guys, what was one match in WrestleMania 1 you enjoyed, and which one do you think could have been off the card? We'll start with you, Aimer.
Okay. I already talked about the Under the Time one. I think that you mentioned the tag team match. The tag team match was really good because, it was something, the crowd just ate it up, right? The American guys against the foreign menace, the presentation, Fred Blassie with the interference, all that stuff, that was top notch. One I could probably do with. I mean, the only one that I would look at and say, this kind of doesn't belong. I understand why they did it, but the King Kong Bundy against Special Delivery Jones. I mean, that wasn't even really a match. It was really just there as a squash for King Kong Bundy. I get why, but I don't look at a match here and say, we should have taken that off the card. I don't see it.
I agree. Siren, what about you? One match that you thoroughly enjoyed? I know you mentioned it before, and then one that you could have done without off the pay-per-view.
You know what? I'm gonna go with the King Kong Bundy off the pay-per-view as well. Not because because it was so quick, and I don't feel like it added much to it, but I also don't know the story leading up or after, right? So like to me, yeah, it was. I was like, well, that was really quick, like it was nice it was cool, like but it was very quick. So yeah,
there was no story about it.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, that makes sense then. And yeah, and I've already definitely my favorite stuff. Probably Junkyard and Valentine was probably my favorite. Also, when they did the intro for the Executioner, they were like, from parts unknown, and I'm like, hey, Hartgrave, I see you.
Yeah, no, and I'm with you guys on that one. I think the King Kong Bundy and Special Delivery Jones was just a squash match just to put King Kong Bundy on the show and give him something to do because he was a special attraction there. But obviously, I'm going to go with a match that ended in double disqualification I thoroughly enjoyed was the Brutus Beefcake David San Martino. Just because of just having their, both Bruno in the corner and I keep forgetting who Brutus's mouthpiece was.
Johnny Valiant, I believe it was.
Johnny Valiant, thank you. And just the match was great. I mean, they were both physical, and you could tell David San Martino really took under his dad's wing, and literally just trained and just got ready for WrestleMania because it was a big match. It was his first WrestleMania. So, but yeah, no, WrestleMania 1, if you guys, again, 1985. Again, if anybody wants to watch any of these WrestleManias, Peacock does have them in their library. If not, I'm sure there's somewhere else. I can't remember where else you can watch them. I'm sure you can find them somewhere.
There's a couple of spots, but I've definitely found a couple of spots.
Yeah. You can find them on YouTube, especially around WrestleMania season. I'm finding that WWE posting more stuff. Like they posted every Royal Rumble, I think, on their channel during Royal Rumble season. And I'm willing to bet that they'll post pretty much every WrestleMania on their YouTube channel as well.
Right.
I think I'm here if you can hear me. So
yeah, no, we hear you, Brandon. Can you hear us now?
Yep, I can. I don't know what the problem was. I've had a long day, so
it's okay. We're glad you could join us, man. Before we move on, let's just get. I want to get your input on the overall first WrestleMania and your takeaway from it.
Man, honestly, the only thing that I remember is the tag match. I mean, of course, I remember the spectacle of it and how many, Hollywood celebrities were involved. Really, the first time they had done that. I remember Roddy Piper talking about going to the back and somebody asking him, was he okay because Muhammad Ali hit him? And his response was, he goes, you felt like a kiss on the cheek. He's still the greatest I've ever seen. And, that match itself had so much star power in it between the four of them, Superfly Snook on the outside, Muhammad Ali on the outside, Pat Patterson on the inside, Bob Orton Jr. on the outside. I mean, the match was just, it did what it was supposed to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love that everything just fell into place. And again, Amer said this was a big risk for McMahon to do a spectacle show like this. I mean, it was something we've never seen before, and it went off, and it was very successful. That it continues today. So we move on to WrestleMania 2.
Before we do, can I throw out just maybe a couple of little trivia tidbits, if you don't mind?
Yeah, for sure.
That I know about because I remembered some things and I did some research about this match. First thing is, you mentioned about Pat Patterson being in the match as a referee. He had to be because he was the only one who could kind of guide Mr. T through his spots. That's the reason you'll see Pat Patterson here. And you'll also see him in WrestleMania 2 during the boxing match that we're going to talk about in a moment. Also, another thing, I don't have firsthand confirmation of this because I think there's probably only one person who could do it, and he's dead. But all of the guys who were in the main event, Hogan, Piper, and Mr. T, they all were – Vince offered all of them, including Paul Orndorff, do you want to just get a straight payoff or do you want a cut of what we're going to make off of this pay-per-view. All of them took the deferred payment except Paul Orndorff. He wanted his money straight up. And I believe I was told, I forget on whose podcast, that he sorely regretted that for obvious reasons. But anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there in case anybody was interested. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I love those. I love the little tidbits that you get from all the WrestleManias and everything like that, especially in pro wrestling. You really like to get all the little tidbits about everything you can and kind of open the curtain a little bit to see, hey, I want to know a little bit more, you know? But for WrestleMania 2, this one was really cool to me because this was the first WrestleMania that they actually had matches in different cities.
And
so they actually telecasted from 3 different cities, and the cities were Uniondale in New York, Rosemont, Illinois, which I just grew up not too far from that town, and LA, California. So it was a really cool concept, and you kind of don't see it a lot anymore where they do it from different cities. You only saw 2 WrestleManias where they did it at. This one, and I believe 13. WrestleMania 13, or was this the only one, Amer?
13? No, 13 was all in one place.
Yeah,
so what you might be thinking of is 12, where they had the backlot brawl with Piper and Goldust, right? Where they had to do some of the filming in advance, and I think they did that in Miami, but the actual show was in Anaheim.
Right.
But they presented it as one show. They tried to present it as all being in one place.
Right, but this was a cool concept, and
very cool.
I mean the idea of, hey, let's just do this in many cities. But my question is then maybe to Brandon. I mean, they did it once, and you got a crowd in one city that was hoping to see this match, but they get this match. Do you think that was kind of also a risky move, and kind of it could have killed WrestleMania too?
I believe it was risky, and I think they were still experimenting.
Yes.
It's been said several times over, if WrestleMania 1 had been a flop, then the WWE would not exist today. They put all their eggs in that one basket. So I believe they were experimenting and seeing what could happen, and I think that's why we never saw it again.
That's right.
Right. And I mean, again, it's just a cool concept. And Siren, I'll ask you, would you ever want to see a WrestleMania where they do it from 2 different cities telecast?
I would be pretty miffed if I wanted to see a specific match and they had all of this build towards it and you don't know what matches are going where, and it's like, oh, and so you're like, okay, especially for me, somebody who's Canadian, like let's say I make the trip all the way down there because I am super excited to see this match, and I get there and it's not at the show that I'm at, I'd be livid. I'd be absolutely livid. So no, I would not want to see that, because I would not want anyone to go through that experience, because I'd be pretty miffed. I'd be miffed.
Yeah, and actually it's crazy because I have the list here of what matches took place in what cities. New York had Paul Orndorff versus the Magnificent Morocco, and then they had the Intercontinental title match between Randy Macho Man Savage, George the Animal Steel, who I loved when he ate the corners and he was just crazy. The third match over there at the Coliseum was Jake Roberts versus George Wells. And then the other match over there was the Mr. T and Roddy Piper boxing match. In Chicago, the matches over there was the women's championship between the Fabulous Moolah and Velvet McIntyre. The second match was the flag match between Corporal Kirshner and Nikolai Volkov. And then the third match was the 20-man battle royal. And the last match was the tag team match between the British Bulldogs and the Dream Team, which was Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake. And then the Los Angeles matches was Ricky the Dragon Steamboat versus Hercules. That's a crazy name to bring up from the past because he was at a lot of WrestleManias. Then there was Adrian Adonis against Uncle Elmer. The Funk Brothers faced Junkyard Dog and Tito Santana. And then obviously the main event was the steel cage match between Hulk Hogan and King Kong Bundy. So I guess
the other match I remember from WrestleMania 2.
Right. And that was my next question. Out of that pay-per-view, what's one match you remember from that pay-per-view that really stood out to you? So Brandon, we'll start with you since you've already said it.
Well, the only two I remember, period, was the boxing match and Hulk Hogan and King Kong Bundy. We've discussed it before. I was the Crockett guy in Virginia, watching Starrcade. Piper was the only reason I started watching the WWF. I just happened to catch him on TV walking down the aisle with Paul Orndorff one day, wondering where my favorite had went to after the dog collar match, and he was unable to wrestle for a while. So, I was like, oh, there he is. So I started watching because of Roddy Piper. And I went back and watched that boxing match several times over the years, and poor Roddy having to carry him like that. Again, I wasn't a big Hulk Hogan fan, so I could have really gave a crap about what he did or what he didn't back as a kid. As far as the three cities go, they could pull it off, in my opinion, better now. Having 2 nights of WrestleMania, do one night somewhere, one another night somewhere, and advertise the card of each city and what night's getting what. I think that can be pulled off now better, because I didn't think this, even as a child, did not think this came across very well back in those days.
Right, and I totally agree. Amer, what about you? What's one match that stuck out to you at that pay-per-view?
Tag team match. All day and 3 times on Sunday. I remember, again, anecdote time. Well, at the time, and this is, for most of the people watching this, probably not even born when this came out, but Adam and Brandon, you may remember. If you couldn't go to the show, you had to watch it on closed circuit.
Yep.
Google it, kids. Okay? There was not even really pay-per-view at the time. I don't think it even existed. I think it was there in time for WrestleMania 3, but at this time it really didn't exist. So you had to go to a venue, right, where they had closed circuit and you could watch it on a screen. Well, myself, my friend, my sister, his sister, and his dad, obviously we need somebody to drive us down there, drove down to Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto, right, to go and watch this, right? And my friend's dad, like, he had a poker face most of the night, but I found out later he was so pissed. Right? It's like, we came all the way down here to watch this on a freaking screen, right? He expected at least it would be live. But I'll never forget that. That was some night. But I remember how hot that arena was during that Bulldogs match, right? And when the Bulldogs won that match, the whole arena exploded, like Stone Cold Steve Austin level exploded at the time. That I remember more than anything else. And if you're going to ask me what match I would take out, that's pretty simple. Jake Roberts against poor George Wells. Sorry, it's like everybody I knew was like, oh yeah, George Wells, and like no one was willing to step up and say, who the hell is George Wells? Everybody was pretending that he was actually somebody. So poor George Wells, but I could have done without that match anyway.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree. I think George Wells was one of those enhancement talents that they just kept around on the roster just to feed to one of their big names, like a Jake Roberts, because Jake Roberts was a very popular wrestler back then.
Oh, yeah.
For me, I'm going to have to go with you on that one, Amer. I think the match I thoroughly enjoyed and remember was the tag match between the British Bulldogs and the Dream Team, just because I was such a huge fan of Davey Boy Smith. And actually Matilda too. The dog was so damn adorable, and everything like that. And they took Matilda everywhere. And my favorite part of that, that pay-per-view is they came out. Actually, no, it was WrestleMania 3. I'm getting ahead of myself. They brought Matilda out, but Matilda was such a cutie when they brought Matilda in for the British Bulldogs. But yeah, no. And if anybody knows, I'm a huge fan of tag team wrestling. And I loved seeing all 4 of these men in a match. Obviously, you had the great, Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake, 2 iconic names in the early days of WWF. And it just really was a fun match to watch. And it was one of the longer matches on the card between the 3 cities. And I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Longest match. Yeah. Actually, I mean, unless you count the boxing match with its, timeout between rounds. But it was long.
Yeah, the boxing match I think was maybe 9 seconds longer, but it was still kind of neck and neck. Right. It was neck and neck, but obviously that tag match had a lot of time and it told a story beautifully, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But yeah, no, WrestleMania 2, I mean, coming from three cities, and obviously your main event card, this was basically the beginning, if you don't count much of WrestleMania 1. but WrestleMania 2 is where you saw Hulk Hogan a lot in the main card scene, like the main title, the headlining match had Hulk Hogan in it for a lot of the WrestleManias through these early days. And it's crazy because we're starting to see that nowadays with, you saw John Cena do a lot of headlining WrestleManias when he was a champion. Then you saw Roman Reigns headline a lot of pay-per-views. But it got to the point where there was just a lot of Hogan, but the crowd ate it up.
Yeah.
But
money.
It was money. So, but this was kind of where you kind of saw the star power of Hulk Hogan in these pay-per-views. Would you not agree, Amer?
100%. Absolutely. I remember listening to podcasts, all the guys like, Arn Anderson and, wrestlers from that generation. The first thing they would do every day is they would say, look, when they posted, upcoming cards and things like that, am I on the Hogan card? Great, because I'm going to make more money that night, right? I mean, that was just reality. Everybody wanted to be, if you could be in the main event with Hogan, okay, fine, you're going to, make more money than you normally do in 3 months. But just even being on the card with Hogan was huge. And it cannot be understated how huge Hulk Hogan was at the time. I don't think it can be.
Right. And then Brandon, I kind of want to get your take on it with, again, with Hogan as well. Do you think we're oversaturated with the same people headlining WrestleMania year after year?
Yes and no. I mean, the press conference took a different turn than what I was expecting it to.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know if you guys watched it or not, but it looked like they're setting up a tag match with Cody and Seth against Roman and The Rock.
I said no spoilers. I didn't spoil it.
At the Elimination Chamber. Sorry, I didn't hear that part. So the press conference definitely took a turn that I was not expecting. And as long as you keep it fresh, and I'm sure I probably said this before because my disdain for Hulk Hogan back when I was a kid, but sitting there watching the NWA matches that I watched with Flair and Dusty and Magnum and Tully that would beat the ever-loving dog crap out of each other and blood flowing and, Flair getting a quick roll-up or having help to, win the match, whatever the case may be. And then you flip the channel and Hogan's getting crushed by King Kong Bundy or Andre or whoever, and all he's got to do is shake a few times, point his finger, say no, hit the foot, hit the leg, 1, 2, 3. And I'm just like, oh, where's Roddy? And, and so, like I said, I got a little tired of that. I mean, I did enjoy his work when he finally turned heel with the NWO at first. I thought he did some good work there. But again, it just depends on the storytelling and how fresh you can keep it on how stale someone can get.
That's it. Different stories. Some people some people prefer this kind of story. Some people prefer that kind of story. But the WWF audience at the time just ate up the Hulk Hogan story. It's like, I want to see him beat another monster. That's all it was, right? I've seen it before, but it worked so well. And to me, when you can, even when you know the story and you still want to watch it, that's when you know you've got something.
And that's the nice thing is when you have a story to the match, and you saw a lot of that in the early days of WWF, that there was stories behind these matches.
The big matches. Yeah.
The big matches. Yeah. But even the biggest ones that you don't really see much nowadays in storytelling is about managers. And during the early days of WWF, a lot of the storylines with the matches and the guys fighting each other kind of dates back to what their manager had done. Biggest manager, heel manager in the history, Bobby the Brain Heenan.
Rest in peace, Bobby.
Everywhere. Yeah, absolutely. He was everywhere in the the earlier WrestleManias. He was managing so many people. Him and Jimmy Hart. I mean, those two were everywhere on those cards during those early days. And I guess I'll start this question off to you, Brandon. Do you want to see that more, where most of the stories stem from what the manager does or say?
Well, I'll start it off with what you were talking about. Look at Roman Reigns and the work Paul Heyman has done with Roman Reigns. And for everybody that wants to gripe about Roman Reigns not being there every week, despite what it may be, with his health condition and stuff like that, people still gripe about him not being there every week. But yet when he's on the card, people tune in to go, is this finally the time he's going to lose? And when he's not there, you still have Heyman telling that story of he's my tribal chief. He's this, he's that. He's going to do this. He does what he wants. So, I mean, now granted, there's not 4 or 5 Paul Heymans the way you had with Bobby Heenan, Freddie Blassie, Jimmy Hart, Jim Cornette, even a young Paulie dangerously back in the day. I think that's a lost art in the sport that has sorely missed, that could tell another story with some of the guys that come out. I mean, Braun Strowman, I think, Braun Strowman could have been huge in the 80s if he'd have had a Bobby Heenan or a Jimmy Hart, because he's a big monster. He's decent in the ring. He's not great, but he can do what he's supposed to do at that size, but he cannot talk. And if he had somebody with him that could talk, that's why, his best run was probably with Bray Wyatt, because he had Bray to do the talking for him. So to me, it's a lost art. And if you need to look any further, just look at Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman, and what Heyman's been able to not only do for Reigns, but continue to do when Reigns cannot physically be there because his body needs time to refresh.
That's a really good point. You also have to remember, and again, this is something that is not something that maybe the newer generation of fans realizes. But even at this time, we're talking about big pay-per-views where WWF made a lot of money. The business, even WWF's business at the time, was still a live event business, right? It was gate-driven.
Yeah, they were running 3 shows a day.
Well, yeah, that's right. So even then, TV was almost a lost leader for them, right? They were still using TV. From what I understand, listening to Bruce Pritchard and people like that, in some markets, they were actually being paid for their TV. But for the most part, TV was just there to promote live events, get people to the shows. And managers were so critical there because, again, like I said in WrestleMania 1, you had managers around ringside, as heat magnets, interacting with the crowd. And I think today, that's not so important. Paul Heyman doesn't do that, right? He doesn't really get the crowd riled up. He doesn't really have to, right? Because now the whole landscape, the whole presentation, the whole wrestling world, the way we watch wrestling, the way wrestling companies get paid and make money is different.
Agreed, but you can also look back at Roman, though. If you look back at Roman's career, everybody knew he was the next anointed one.
Yes.
His career never took off until he came back from the leukemia.
That's right.
And Paul Heyman was sitting right next to him, and that just got the whole wrestling world a buzz because Roman Reigns was sitting next to Paul Heyman. And if you want to go back, for any of my NWA people out there, for a historic tag team that people push to get put in the Hall of Fame, which is the Midnight Express, none of those guys could cut a promo. Not Condrey, not Eaton, and as good. Stan Lane had a great announcing voice, but he could not cut a promo. Without Jim Cornette, the Midnight Express would not ever be talked about.
Damn straight.
So you can like him or hate him. It doesn't really matter. It's the facts are.
But you will not ignore him.
With Arn and Tully, they could both cut a promo. They didn't need JJ. JJ was like a window dressing. But, a lot of these guys over the annals of history, if you stop and look, a lot of those guys, like the Midnight Express, would not have been where they were without who they had in their corner and talking for them.
Correct.
Right. And Siren, it sounded like you wanted to have an input on the whole role of the manager.
Oh, it was actually about content consumption. The reason that things have changed so much is because the way that people consume their content is different. People's attention spans are different.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a completely different way that people eat up their content now, right? So, I just think that whole thing is a little bit, it's different. I miss the idea of the managers. But then at the same time, you have people like Danhausen who get put in a role that is similar, like go out there, and I just call him a meme. He's just a walking meme. But essentially, he's out there, he's riling the crowd, he's doing what your managerial role would have done, but he's not wrestling, and I'd prefer him to wrestle. So, I mean, I don't know.
That's a crazy part too.
Danhausen over Orange Cassidy any day.
Heck yeah.
I agree.
But that's a great part is that you've got, I mean, you also had that at, I'm about to get ahead of myself because we're about to move on to it, but you had enforcers with other groups of wrestlers. You had, we're about to get to WrestleMania 3, so I'll mention it. Dino Bravo came out with Bruce Beefcake and Greg Valentine, but he wasn't in the match, but he was there. He was present, but he was just on the outside. So you still have that role of, hey, the professional wrestlers there next to the manager of the actual team, but they're still being utilized. But I do like to see them in the ring. So I kind of understand where you're coming from with that, Siren. And I honestly want to see more of the whole shtick of the whole chasing the manager around. And, you know, you don't see that much anymore. You get the managers coming in, being the voice. I mean, even some of those backstage promos we talk about, a lot of the time it's the manager talking if there's the manager present.
Well,
because a lot of those guys didn't have the voice to cut a promo.
Well, another point on that, and I'll give you, is like where I was saying that, you know, Paul Heyman automatically elevated Roman Reigns to a different character. But if you go back in the annals of history, now when they bring in somebody new, somebody up from NXT or somebody in from Japan or another federation that the WWE audience isn't specifically familiar with, we can use Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson as a good example. Both those guys could talk. But most of the New York audience did not know who they were. They put them with Bobby Heenan, which gave them immediate credibility. That's what's missing. It takes a lot further time to get these guys over, and girls now, because the bolster of the women's roster. It takes a lot more time to get these guys and girls over with the crowd, where you could just put them with a Bobby Heenan or a Jimmy Hart and like, oh, there's somebody they've got there with them, and you know, getting that immediate pop.
Yeah, that's very true.
So I would say, for kind of similar to what you guys, like what they had back then, I'd say probably the closest that we would have would have been either Stokely. I guess he gets out there, he gets the crowd a little bit riled when he is with people. And I think the best hype man, I don't know if you really call him a manager, I guess so, but Alex whatever. Yeah, that guy. Like, I mean, I'm sorry, but he works that crowd when he is out there. Oh, he definitely does. Like, I think that he's probably, I would say probably then the closest to what you guys are talking about in the managerial.
And to go back at that, if you listen to some of the old school managers like the Bobby Brain and Jimmy South, like they get on the mic, they're very enthusiastic when they say their words. Like, you want to do this? This is what we're gonna do. Like, that's what you see Alex doing. Even when when Penta and Phoenix are speaking Spanish, like Penta says, and he like goes at it. He understands like the history of how enthusiastic you have to be as a manager, especially when you're doing that, when you're working with a Spanish speaking wrestler like a luchador. You have to break that and be enthusiastic to show that same energy that your wrestler is showing as a manager. Brandon, go ahead. What you were about to say.
For as critical as I am of a lot of stuff on AEW TV, Prince Nana is probably my favorite thing on wrestling TV.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
yeah. I do that in my living room when Swerve comes out. So, I'm not even going to lie about it. But
can I point out, since we're speaking about managers, Prince Nana channeling the spirit of Paul Bearer and using his dance on Dynamite, like as if he was the Undertaker's urn. I was just like, buddy, you have just gone up like 3 steps in my book. That's awesome. Anyway.
Yeah, no, and I love it. I love it. I love that the fact that, you know, that we get to talk about that role, because we don't talk about managers much, you know, in pro wrestling. We talk about the wrestlers, you know. But
that's many left.
Right. No. Well, with that, we move on to WrestleMania 3.
Sorry, can I just for one tidbit out? I apologize.
My bad. And then we'll move on to WrestleMania 3.
Absolutely. Yeah, but just to kind of, you know, put a bow on it, the idea of having it in 3 different locations. If you remember, you thought WrestleMania 1 had a lot of celebrities. WrestleMania 2 had tons of celebrities. Each location had like a celebrity as an announcer. Like if I remember correctly, in New York we had Vince, and he was with Susan St. James, like from Kate and Alley, and I don't remember all the rest. But every location, like in Los Angeles, they had Claire Peller, and we're really dating ourselves, right? This lady who was like, you know, like on Wendy's commercials and things like that. And it was at the time where it's like, you know what? If you're a celebrity, we want you at WrestleMania in one place or the other, right? And again, gate-driven, right? I mentioned about how the business was so gate-driven then. And so the idea was, well, gee, instead of having WrestleMania in one place and getting 1 gate, let's have it in 3 places and get 3 gates. That was the idea. But again, the logistics, I think then they realized it's like, oh, wait, we need 3 production trucks. You know, we need 3 sets. We need all that. They weren't so big on sets. But again, just the logistics of that were just absolute killer. Last point I'll make, and then let's move on to WrestleMania 3. WrestleMania 2 is unique. That main event is unique. Anybody want to guess why? Only steel cage match ever at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Well,
And there's a reason for that, because, and I do recall this when somebody, I think Bruce Prichard pointed it out, you couldn't see, right? You had Hulk Hogan and King Kong Bundy, and unless, even if you were in the arena, that old blue cage that they had, it was tough to see through, right? And it obscured people's visions. And I remember that if you were watching on closed circuit or on TV somehow, it was hard to see the match. And at that point, Vince is like, no more steel cage matches at WrestleMania. We need people to be able to see what's actually going on in the ring. So,
I had that old blue cage ring as a toy back in the day. I wish I still had it, but
there you go. So again,
and now we've had a couple of Hell in a Cell matches at WrestleMania, so everything's better with that, I guess.
Hell in a Cell is a whole different kind of cell, and of course you can put cameras inside the ring with
and
that.
And you can still get cameras in it, right?
Yeah.
So moving on to WrestleMania 3, this one was a big one. This one was very memorable.
A big one.
Inside the classic Pontiac Silverdome in Michigan, in Pontiac, Michigan. Like, Hogan gets all these arenas confused for the Silverdome, brother. But this was a huge pay-per-view. You know, obviously the main event was Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. But the whole card was actually really stacked. Yes. And I actually want to get your guys' take, not even on matches, but entrances. This WrestleMania, we saw an introduction of a way that the competitors come to the ring in the moving small rings.
Yep.
So I want to get your guys' take. Do you think that was cool, and would you like to see it again?
I guess it depends on the entrance and the competitor. You know, the Ultimate Warrior, you know, when they did it, you know, I want to say they did it in Toronto for 6, if I remember correctly.
But he did not. He ran out.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. He still ran. But I mean, for people the size of, you know, an Andre, you know, the Big Show, people that to that size, yeah, go ahead, get them out there quick. But for guys that have, you know, they come out and they're doing a lot of things during their entrance, you know, I think it's a pick and choose type of deal.
Yeah, what
they came out on little segways?
Yeah, not on segways, but kind of on like almost like can you picture like a horse cart, right? Like a horse, you know, a horse and buggy cart sort of thing. That's what they came out on. They were wheeled out. And again, from listening to other podcasts, the reason is because the Silverdome was just so damn big, right? That for wrestlers to walk out there, each entrance would have taken 4 or 5 minutes. Now, today, 4 or 5 minute entrance, boy, gee, that's quick, right? But in those days, especially when you got 12 matches on the card, like we do here, that would have taken up a whole hour. Right, and they didn't have a whole hour just for entrances, so that was
I think it was cool. It was a cool concept, and obviously the one guy that I remember from that pay-per-view that didn't even use it was Roddy Piper. I don't know if he was the only one that didn't do it, but I believe he was, because everybody else was brought down in those little wrestling things. But I guess for you guys, what is one match that you remember from that card that you were like, this match should have been longer?
You're not asking what was the best match, because that's obvious. Anyway, Brandon, you go first. Which one would you like to see more of?
Probably the Hart Foundation and the British Bulldogs. I mean, they always, you know, they were always on fire. If I remember, that was WrestleMania 3, correct?
It was.
Yeah. It was actually Danny Davis with the Hart Foundation. Yeah.
You know, that they always had good matches. I mean, you know, the rest of them, as far as what they were, I thought Steamboat and Savage had the exact amount of time they needed. Hogan and Andre probably could have went a little shorter with the two of those guys. And of course, you know, that was Piper's first hurrahs retiring to go to Hollywood for a little while, and the introduction of Brutus the Barber Beefcake shaving Adrian's head. So those are the 4 matches that I actually remember from the card. So
yeah, they made that a 6-man with the Hart Foundation British Bulldogs because Dynamite Kid just, you know, really couldn't go, or at least certainly not at the level that people expected.
He was used to, right?
Yeah. So that's why they threw Tito Santana in on one side and Danny Davis on the other. Yeah. I mean, obviously everybody knows about the Steamboat and Savage, and in my tidbit section, I'm going to say something about that. I think. Yeah, I'm with you. It would have been good had the Hart Foundation got some more time. I think the Dream Team and the Rougeaus match was a little bit underrated. I have a feeling, I don't remember whether I heard this or not, but I think that had a little bit of time cut just because they were going long.
Yeah, and this was a pay-per-view that had a lot of tag matches on it.
Yes.
There was a lot of tag matches. And one match I remember, and this is what I was telling you guys in the group chat today, was if you haven't watched WrestleMania 3, you just have to watch it, because it was Hillbilly Jim and King Kong Bundy, but they were in a tag match with little people, as we like to call them. And Hillbilly Jim's team, there was a wrestler, two midget wrestlers named Haiti Kid and Little Beaver. Mm-hmm. And on King Kong Bundy's team, there was Little Tokyo and Lord Littlebrook. So it was one of those matches, and it was crazy. And I was just
look at Siren's face.
Yeah, no, and Siren, this is why you need to watch when you watch WrestleMania 3. You'll be like, oh, but it was so great. It was such an entertaining match. I really wish it went longer and had more spots, because this was like the first time you actually saw like midget wrestlers on TV that was on a major show. And it was awesome. And you had the great moment of when Little Beaver's attacking King Kong Bundy, but he's so small. King Kong Bundy beats him. And that's how Hillbilly Jim's team wins, is by DQ. Because he attacked.
He wasn't.
And then all the midgets would gang up on Bundy.
Yeah, and the best part was Jesse the Body Ventura's commentary during that whole match.
Oh,
Little Beaver, he shouldn't have been in there to deal with King Kong Bundy. He knew what he was doing. Like, commentary on par with Jesse the Body Ventura.
Best heel commentator ever. Well, I mean, maybe Heenan.
Like I say with you, Amer, I think that Dream Team versus the Raju brothers should have went a little longer. I was very thoroughly enjoying that. Obviously, you had Danny Davis, who former referee, can't referee anymore, becomes a wrestler. Teams with the Heart Foundation. They find a way to cheat to win, to beat Tito Santana and the British Bulldogs. And then obviously the best match on that card was that Ricky Steamboat Randy Savage match. Obviously the longest match on the card. Yes. Probably the best Intercontinental title match I've ever seen in the history of pro wrestling. Just because you had two very athletic wrestlers in there. You know, they were doing their spots, you know, Randy doing the little showboating, but Ricky just wrestling and fighting and, you know, putting those spots on there. And honestly, I could have watched that compared to what today's big matches are. That honestly could have gone 20, 25 minutes.
Wow. You framed my tidbit section perfectly. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But obviously this card was also weird for a reason. Because this card actually did not feature a women's match. And the only woman that was basically involved in any kind of match was Fabulous Moolah when she came to the ring with not Hillbilly Jim, that was before, Harley Race and Bobby the Brain when he wrestled Junkyard Dog in that Loser Must Bow match.
Elizabeth was Savage.
Elizabeth was with Savage.
Well, Miss Elizabeth, but I'm saying like ones that actually wrestled, you know, the actual women wrestlers. She was there just showboating the crown. But the two previous WrestleManias, I believe WrestleMania 1 had a match and WrestleMania 2 had a women's match.
Correct.
This was one you didn't see it.
Yeah.
Would you guys like to why didn't we see one?
It's a good question. I'm going to go back and listen to Bruce Prichard talk about it. Well, no, actually, I can't, because he joined the company a few days after WrestleMania 3, so he probably wouldn't have answers for this. But that's a really good question. I think at the time, remember, and again, you know, newer fans may not realize this, but Fabulous Moolah was still kind of in control of women's wrestling at the time. It was still her thing, right? So I guess, you know, and she was the kind who would like grab Vince McMahon by his ear and make him listen, like, you know, it was like his aunt or something like that, do what, you know, whatever she wanted him to hear. I guess she didn't feel that she had a viable opponent, or maybe Vince said, "Sorry, Moo, we just don't have enough time."
Yeah, no, Brandon, what about your take on that? No women's match at WrestleMania 3.
I'm assuming she was back champion at this time. Moolah was.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Good assumption. It's been so long ago, to be honest with you, that she's about the only one that, you know, besides Wendy Richter and, you know, you had your Velvet McIntyre, Leilani Kaz, and people like that. It was all, they recycled a lot of them. Yeah. And, you know, stuff like that had just been seen already. So, and they put so many people on this card. The only thing I'm in, you know, agreeance that she probably didn't feel like she had a worthy opponent for that big a show. And they might have she might have had one, and they might have told her no, that there wasn't enough time with all the matches they put on the card.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, and if you remember the episode of Dark Side of the Ring about all those women wrestlers who, made claims about Fabulous Moolah and how she had, the iron grip on the women's division as it was, that, you really kind of didn't see anybody on par with her if she was on the same card. But also this pay-per-view was very interesting because this is one of the very earlier pay-per-views I remember WWE, WWF back then doing like announcing records of attendance. This was like the first time I've actually heard them. And according to them, they had 93,000 and like 170 people is what they said. Where in actuality, someone said it was closer to 78,000. So you kind of sense it's like, the numbers might be inflated a little bit. But you see that nowadays in pro wrestling where maybe some places, inflate the numbers.
They also use the in attendance numbers, not necessarily ticket sale numbers. So in attendance includes
and that was my next question.
Concession stand people,
yeah, and that was my next question for you guys about like this is like the first WrestleMania where they really started doing the attendance, and so like again, like do you guys think that trend continues where they inflate the numbers?
I'm sure
100%.
they do. I'm sure they do. Yeah,
I'm sure. Everybody else will. So you got to make yourself look good when all the seats are full. I mean, at the end of the day, who really cares?
Yeah. I mean, and come on, AEW did pull some shenanigans with Wembley, not to this extent maybe, but clearly they did, right? So, yeah,
right.
I was going to say, if guys are going to tell you that this is 5 inches, then they're tell you that they sold more tickets than they did.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and also, tell you, I've been, we went to, I guess it's been about 6 months ago, and I get tired of seeing this. I get tired of the negativity. I mean, you like it, you watch it, keep moving. I mean, it's kind of what it is. But we went to a show in DC. It was a Dynamite, and the hard cam side was pretty well empty. I mean, the other side was full. Don't get me wrong. We were, it was pretty good. There was only a few seats on the other side left. But, I don't know if they could book a smaller arena to maybe make it look better or however they may need to do it. But at the end of the day, the networks don't care if you got 10 people in the seats as long as people are actually watching on TV. So it's a different time. I mean, they're not getting paid by that gate anymore. So as long as the network's getting viewers and they're getting sponsors to buy advertising during those shows, they can really care how many people's in those seats.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's great now because now you're starting to see a lot of, wrestling shows get some good numbers, regardless if they inflate them or not. Even the smaller I wouldn't say small promotions, but promotions like a TNA and a CMLL and all those, they still fill their arenas. I mean, even New Japan, regardless that their audience sits on their butts the entire time and don't even stand up for crazy moves because of certain rules and regulations that their country has for them there. If anybody follows my story about how they talked about that on one of the Dark Side of the Rings about the collision in Korea where they have certain laws where most of the fans can't even stand and cheer. They have to stay seated.
Yep.
How fun would that be to perform in front of?
That
it'd be nerve-wracking, I think.
Takeaway from going to the Dynamite that I went to was where they had to face the hard cam side during the promo segment, and for the camera, it was like, God, that's got to suck.
Yeah,
you remember that a lot of them did that during COVID to absolutely.
No, I agree.
Nobody.
I agree, but it's like I'm sitting on this side watching them, watching their back with the microphone pointed this way, going, God, how do you get hyped up for that? It's like
valid.
Copeland, like it's like going to one side, going and then going to the other. It's like, oh wait, because it's like you had to unlearn that.
Well, actually, it's been longer than 6 months. I can tell you what show it was. It was when MJF and Adam Cole fought to that time limit draw for Adam Cole to get a title shot.
Okay,
and I shook my head because like I had my kid with me and he's a big AEW fan, and I went with him, and when they did the 1, 2, and then they rang the bell for the time limit, I'm like, they didn't just do that without announcing a countdown because nobody knew what happened. And
guess what happened on Wednesday? Yeah.
They're like, he's like, well, what? I said it was a time limit draw, but nobody else was going to know that till they announce it. And so, but I mean, again, it was a good show, but I just, I critique too much from everything I've watched over the years. So
do I.
No, great. No, it's great. Great to see that people get out and actually just enjoy the product instead of arguing online. Before we move on to WrestleMania 4, Amer, do you have any tidbits about WrestleMania 3?
Sure. We didn't run down the card. You want maybe we can do that quickly. Well, the interesting thing to me is here, looking back at WrestleMania 3, look at kind of the ride that people are kind of taking on. It's great. We start out with the Can-Am Connection, Rick Martel and Tom Zink against Bob Orton and the Magnificent Morocco. And a lot of people are kind of scratching their heads and saying, well, who the hell are these guys? Well, Bob Orton happens to be Randy Orton's father, so there's kind of a frame of reference. And again, lots of good tag teams here. Then we follow that up with Billy Jack Haynes against Hercules. People have to Google those. And Hercules came out with Bobby Heenan. He was part of the Heenan family. That was a double countout. Then the match with the midgets that you mentioned, Hillbilly Jim, Haiti Kid, and Little Beaver against King Kong Bundy, Little Tokyo, and Lord Littlebrook. Then we had in a loser must bow match, which was kind of interesting, Harley Race, who was the king. He defeated Junkyard Dog by pinfall. And the Junkyard Dog did actually bow to Harley Race, but then, of course, he smashed him with his scepter, and that was all sorts of fun. You'll enjoy this when you see it, Siren. Then we have the Dream Team, Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcase, in the match that I think got cut for being long. They defeated the Rougeau brothers, Jacques and Raymond Rougeau. Sorry, what was
I watched that. I watched that. That was the one where I was like, man, if I was in the crowd, I would have got out there and I would have tossed that ref in the ring myself.
Yeah, I hear you. Absolutely. Okay, Roddy Piper defeated Adrian Adonis by pinfall, and that was a hair match where Brutus Beefcake did cut Adrian Adonis's hair. Danny Davis and the Hart Foundation, we alluded to this, defeated Tito Santana and the British Bulldogs by pinfall. Butch Reed with Slick, speaking of managers, I still remember Reverend Slick, good manager, underrated manager, defeated Coco Beware. And then the match everybody remembers, Ricky Steamboat against Randy Savage, winning by pinfall. Ricky Steamboat winning the title there. Honky Tonk Man defeated Jake Roberts, who had Alice Cooper with him, still trying to get that shine from celebrities. Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov, again, with Slick as their manager. I think Freddie Blassie had retired at this time. He wasn't able to really, be out in the ring. Defeated the Killer Bees, but B. Brian Blair, we still see. I think we saw him at WrestleMania. There were some pictures online about him being there because he lives down in Florida. And Jim Brunzell. And then, of course, the one everybody remembers. And I still remember about a year ago during WrestleMania season, I was sitting watching with my mom. And it's like, okay, Mom, it's time for Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. And she's like, gee, I hope Hulk Hogan wins. And I was just like, what? And then that's when it kind of started to hit me. It's like, I better start really, really, really treasuring these moments with my mom, because I could see from the look on her face, she honestly did not remember what happened in this match. And so I really, she comes over on weekends. She lives with my sister most of the week. And I really, really enjoy sitting down and watching it, because I can watch the 1992 Royal Rumble with somebody who doesn't remember what happens, right? And I'm just like, this is awesome, that I can watch and enjoy this. Everybody knows what happens if you've ever watched wrestling, but she doesn't. So that the moments like that are a little special to me. But the ride that they took people on, and again, just for my tidbits, I know I don't want to take up too much time, about the Steamboat Savage match, which everybody remembers. Randy Savage laid it out almost move by move with Ricky Steamboat. Yep. Most guys were completely averse to that. Let's call it in the ring. What are you doing all this planning? But Savage was one of the few guys. He could call it in the ring if he had to. But he liked the idea of planning it out. Okay, I'm going to do this, brother, and then you're going to do this. And like that. And that's something that really made this match awesome. The other thing is, it was a personal issue. It wasn't just about the title, right? Because Savage had basically used a bell and rammed it onto Ricky Steamboat's larynx, and Steamboat sold it so well, and people weren't even sure whether he could make the match or what shape he would be in. And it was about a title, but it was a personal issue, and the title mattered. Right? And one day I hope to have a really in-depth conversation about whether the title is a prop or whether it's a crutch. It's both. It can be either, and it depends on the story. Last thing I wanted to say, and I wanted to actually say this for a while. If you asked 100 wrestlers from today's generation, let's say you could go back and quantum leap to WrestleMania 3 and be one person and have that match, I dare say 99 out of those 100 wrestlers depending on whether they're kind of a natural face or a natural heel, would either say, I want to be Ricky Steamboat and have that match, or I want to be Randy Savage. You might find one guy, maybe somebody like an MJF, who said, I want to be Hulk Hogan because I want to draw the house and have the most awesome match that everybody remembers. Wrestling has changed a lot. The world has changed a lot, and I think wrestling has changed with it. You think I'm wrong about that? I'd like to hear what other people think about that. You think most wrestlers would want to go back and say, I want to have the most awesome match on the card? And very, very few, if any, would say, I want to draw the house.
It really depends. I mean, if you got your old school guys that really followed, that enjoyed, a Flair Steamboat, a Savage Steamboat type wrestling match. And then you got the guys like, an MJF that want to be the spectacle. And right. It might not be so much about, drawing the house per se as it is being the marquee name on the sign.
Yeah.
And, tidbit about Steamboat with this, right after they put that title on him, you may remember he went to Vince and hey, I need some time off to spend with family. And Vince,
his wife was about to give birth. Yeah.
Like, I just put the title on you, huh? So that's why, the Honky Tonk Man was not scheduled to win that title. Steamboat was supposed to have a good run with it. And I will tell you one other thing too. This is how bad I hated Hulk Hogan. I never cared for Andre the Giant. I just, as a kid, thought he was born. Okay, whatever. Big dude, set on him 1, 2, 3, get it over with. But I was hoping Andre won the match. I hated Hulk Hogan.
I like you.
What do you guys think about what I said?
I enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoyed it. I think today also you look at, where wrestlers are in every promotion where they say they don't even care, where they just want to be on the card nowadays. It just doesn't matter who's headlining and who's the opening match. I don't know where it was that I read it. I read somewhere a wrestler nowadays said doesn't care if I'm like the fourth match. I think it might have been Bully Ray or someone, but someone said, I don't care if I'm the third. It was Bully Ray because he talked about the trio of tag matches he had with Edge and Christian and the Hardys. And he said, it doesn't matter if I'm third on the card. I'm going to tear the house down in that third match. I don't even have to main event. Just give me that place on the card and I'll give you a match. So I think, back then, it was more so, hey, we're going to make money because this guy's in our main event and we're on the card, so we're making money. I think now it's just more so we just want to be on the card. I think it's just the wrestlers just trying to show and be like, hey, I just want to be on the card, especially for this pay-per-view.
It's nice when you have guaranteed contracts, you can afford
exactly.
that.
Well, that's kind of where I was getting ready to go with that. I agree with you to a point. But in those days, those guys, they got paid by where they were on the card and what it was drawing.
100%.
And you still have some guys and girls today that just want to get out there and show what they can do and try to move up. And unfortunately, in every company, it's not just one in particular. You've got, guys that just the guaranteed contracts are, I don't care, I'm getting paid. And that's where the passion is lacking these days in the promos, with the in-ring work. They're getting guaranteed money. They don't really, they worked how they had to work to get that contract, and they just go out there when they get their name called. I mean,
double-edged sword. Yeah, it really is, right? Like, I'm glad people don't, work hurt because they have to, or else they don't get paid. I'm glad that, guys, don't go bankrupt or whatever nowadays because they get these very, very healthy contracts. But there is the other side of that coin. Right. Guys are just like, why should I put in an extra effort? I'm not going to get paid any more money.
It was it came out, and Dolph Ziggler actually discussed it before he got released when he signed his last contract with the WWE. It was put in there that, if he wasn't going to be used, he didn't have to show up. Gallows and Anderson had the same stipulation in their contract that came out when they brought them back. Instead of everybody showing up, being backstage, all hands on deck, somebody gets hurt, we change something, we'll put you out there. Now, if Dolph or, the Good Brothers, I'm sure it's probably worked into a few more contracts now that, if they weren't being used, they didn't have to show up for the show, and they're still getting paid.
Right. Now, we'll get to Siren's take real quick, and then we'll move on to WrestleMania 4.
I was just saying that I'm really kind of hoping that it's not just the rose-colored glasses that I look through for everything in my life when I look at today's wrestling. But I think that the reason a lot of that has changed and the attitude and stuff like that has changed is because there's a lot more of a supportive kind of feel in the back room, like in the locker room, than there was before. It's not as competitive because, as you said, you're not fighting for necessarily a spot in placement on the card, right? So like people are a lot more helpful and supportive towards each other and growing their characters and working together to help each other succeed, because it's not like if I succeed, this person doesn't anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I feel like that's fostered a little bit more of a healthy work culture in the back. And with that, I feel you're not getting as many people, necessarily pushing as hard, which is unfortunate. It's not as competitive in the back. But at the same time, you don't have, I mean, at least I don't think anyway, that, you know, fighting, clawing for the top spot just to get paid, and it makes things a little bit easier for everybody. I don't know. I think it's a nicer environment.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you an example. When Magnum TA had his car wrecked, he was not under a guaranteed contract. The boys actually took up a collection to make sure his bills and stuff got paid while he was in the hospital. But on the flip side, like when Dante Martin suffered his injury, he was under contract. So under surgery, rehab, and he was still getting paid. So that much I do appreciate about the business of today. Those guys having that guaranteed contract, if they go out there, put it all on the line, get hurt in the ring, they're not worried about how their bills are going to be paid, how they're going to put food on the table for their family. So that's a definite upside.
Right.
But for every Magnum TA who had the guys helping him out, there's 100 guys that we didn't hear about, right? Who got hurt one night and you never heard about them again.
Well, that's why Taz, when everybody talks about Paul Heyman back in ECW, Taz has always said he would never say anything bad about Paul, because when he broke his neck, Paul did not have to pay him, but he kept paying him every week until he came back to work. So
you'll also hear a lot of opposite stories about Paul and money.
Yeah.
But yes,
absolutely. There's a lot of people Paul still owes money to, but
we take the good with the bad.
Yep.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. So we move on to WrestleMania 4. This one took place in 1988 in Atlantic City at the Boardwalk Hall. Actually, it was advertised at the Trump Plaza, but this card was an interesting card because at the time the WWF title was vacant. So during this WrestleMania, they had a 14-man single elimination tournament to determine the new WWF champion, and the bracket had a lot of big names to it. The bracket included, names like Randy Savage, $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, and some undercard guys too in the bracket that you never expected to make it far, but they pushed them. My question for you guys is, for the tournament style, we've seen this a couple of times for when a title for the title is vacant. For this and at Survivor Series 98, I believe, games when they had the tournament there. Would you guys like to see more of this if the title ever became vacant instead of seeing it on TV? Would you rather have a whole pay-per-view geared towards a tournament to crown a new champ?
One of my favorite pay-per-views all the time was the original way they did the King of the Ring. I really enjoyed that. A lot of people didn't like 4 because of the tournament. I could not tell you any of the matches except for 2, which was Hogan and Andre with the double count out. And then, DiBiase and Savage in the finals with Hogan and Andre both getting involved. But I enjoy the tournament aspect of it. Maybe bring a couple of guys, girls in, whatever title happens to be vacant, and, give them a little bit of push to make them look like they belong there. And then at the end of the day, you had the house explode with who everybody wants to win.
I'd rather see it on a regular televised program than a pay-per-view, and the only reason for that is you have to wait for a pay-per-view, and it depends, I guess, on when the title's vacated. And I mean, not everybody has the ability to purchase the pay-per-views, and I think that something like that would be really nifty for people to be able to watch. But hey, that's just me. Yeah. But I agree. I like the tournament style when a belt's vacated. I think that's awesome. That's better than having like an interim. I didn't like the interim idea. I think it's very wishy-washy and it leads to poor story. Lazy story is what I want to call it.
Yeah. Lazy booking.
Lazy booking. That's right.
Essentially, yeah. So I like the tournament idea. I don't feel the need to wait for a pay-per-view for it myself. But I like the tournament idea.
Well, at least nowadays we're not waiting quarterly for a pay-per-view. We get one a month.
That's true. Landscape has changed. It really has. I hear what you're saying, Siren. For me, I don't like what tournaments have become. Like, we're having these qualifying matches to get into Elimination Chamber, or I'm not a big fan of that. Where it's like, okay, well, it's a tournament, and we just had that with the U.S. title, right, with Kevin Owens, and it goes over 3 or 4 weeks. I get why. I understand it because you need to produce content for your shows every week, and this was totally different. I do like how, if you do it too much, it kills the whole vibe. But every once in a while, when there's a story around it, and you mentioned about Survivor Series 98, what an awesome story they told with the tournament in that 3 hours. And here it's the same thing. It started with probably what I think is the greatest story that WWF ever told, right? With how the title became vacant in the first place. Where there was, and most people probably know this, but there was and it was on TV. Siren. There was a thing called Saturday Night's Main Event. This might have been the main event, right? And it was on primetime television on NBC, and it got like an insane rating, like something like 16.3 or something like that. There's not even any way to put that in today's terms. It was huge, right? It was like a Seinfeld episode or a Friends episode, from that might be more familiar to people. And they had Hulk Hogan kind of getting screwed out of the title, during a match where Dave and Earl Hebner pulled off a twin referee thing. And the way that they told that story was just so incredible. And it created this great story for this tournament in WrestleMania 4. What I've heard, and again, listening to Bruce, is that Vince did it, but he wasn't a big fan of the tournament model, and that's why WWE didn't like it, or WWE didn't do it a lot going forward. He got reconvinced around King of the Ring at some point. It's like, fine, let's do it. But yeah, he wasn't big on the tournament idea.
With the that's that whole, you said you didn't like it that it was like tournaments over weeks. I think that the reason that they would do something like that, how many times did Macho Man wrestle that night?
4.
That's a lot, man. Like, that's a lot, And I feel like nowadays people are a little bit more, because they don't have to put in that amount of wear and tear on their bodies all in one night. That maybe that's why they stretch it over the top, not just for content. I mean, personally, I think the roster is bloated enough. You could definitely fill your content with more wrestling with other people. But I think the reason you'd stretch out a tournament, in my personal opinion, would just be so you don't have people working that hard in one freaking night. 4 matches, four in one night. That's a lot. That's a lot for, people were super impressed when MJF opened and closed a pay-per-view, but like 4 matches, like that's doing a whole tournament in one night. That sounds tiresome. And by the time you get to the end, I imagine it would be an epic showdown, because you're like, oh, these guys put in so much all night. But at the same time, were they just as quick as they were at the beginning of the night? Were they at the top form like they were in the beginning of the night? I don't know, and you're paying to see that. You're paying to see people get wore down and wore down and wore down. And yeah, sure, you got that whole story of like at the end it's a knockdown drag out. They're really fighting for it tooth and nail. But I mean, wouldn't you like to see it like fresh? The tournament go like you're fresh. I don't know. Maybe that's just a side take on it.
Yeah.
Well, 2 things I'll say for that. If you get to the end of the tournament and you got to, it sets up a story. Somebody can bring that up to get them a rematch. But I will also say, for the tournament's sake, that King of the Ring launched Stone Cold Steve Austin, and so it has its good and its bad points depending on how it is done. I mean, yeah, really. Like, as much as I enjoyed the King of the Ring at the beginning, it really got bad when they would try to bring it back. Bret Hart winning. What did he wrestle 3 times that night after winning the qualifying match on Raw or something? But I mean, depending on the way it's done, it's like anything else, depending on the way it's booked. But it can be done really well and set up a story to give somebody that hey, well, you caught me after I wrestled 3 times. You couldn't beat me if I'm fresh. It sets up.
That's what they did. Yeah, that's actually exactly what they did. And again, remember, there was no Raw the next night, right? I mean, they didn't have that. They took a week off, and then they did TV tapings. That's how it was back then.
Yeah, and the interesting with this pay-per-view with the tournament, there was 2 buys. And one buy that happened, it totally overpassed me because I was like, holy crap, that guy is like a mid-card wrestler, yet he's got to buy to the semifinals of this tournament. And that was one-man gang.
Yeah.
It was just shocking to me. It was kind of the beginning of like shock factor of, oh my God, this guy is in the semis now. Like I didn't expect this guy to make the semis. But it wasn't just a tournament. There was also a whole card of other matches. Besides the tournament, was there another match on the card that kind of stuck out to you guys?
I told you the only 2 matches I remember were from the tournament. So, and I hadn't had a chance to look over all this stuff today. So
there was a good tag match. Demolition against Strikeforce, Tito Santana against Rick Martel, that went about 12 minutes. And it was, again, because you're telling a story, the way that WWF structured the show was, it started with a battle royal, but then they went with some matches, and then they, had a singles match so that Macho Man and Liz could go back and change into different outfits. And, Siren, you'll be impressed. Elizabeth wore a different dress every time she came out. So they had to go back and get dressed again and come out in different gear. And Randy also had different clothes for each time that he came out.
2 very underrated tag teams, in my opinion, you brought up.
Sorry,
2 very underrated tag teams, in my opinion, you brought up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sorry, what were you saying?
I said I would be impressed, but I've been to a Judas Priest concert before.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was the other match that really I enjoyed was that tag match. Just because I was a big fan of Tito Santana.
Yeah, me too.
So, excuse me. But between the tournament, obviously, like Brandon said, you obviously remember the main event of that tournament with Ted DiBiase and Randy Savage with pretty much the start of the mega powers between him and Hogan.
That's right.
But again, that comes back to the whole Hogan has to be in the spotlight now. Do you think Hogan's involvement in that main event kind of deterred the main focus on Randy Savage finally winning a world title?
Yes and no. I mean, they weren't going to put, Savage over clean, even as the baby face of the match, simply so they could set up the rest of the story and have somewhere to go after the pay-per-view. But having Andre involved, you kind of had to have Hogan out there as well. So, 6 of one, half dozen the other.
Yeah. In retrospect, it would have been nice if Savage had kind of got his moment. Sure, like that's hindsight. But again, as Bruce always points out, Vince's whole thing is Hogan must pose, right? That's what the fans are expecting. So, at the time, in that moment, if Hogan hadn't come out there and been there at the end, fans would have said, "Where's Hogan?" We're kind of it would almost have been a disappointment, I think, for some of the fans in attendance, maybe.
Right, and this was
that's hindsight.
This was one of the very few WrestleManias where Hogan didn't really main event and win a title.
Not win a title, but he sort of main evented.
But he sort of main evented, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the whole card itself. Obviously, we talk about it with the tournament and everything like that, and how you don't see it much anymore on a pay-per-view, but you see it over the weeks now on TV. And I could kind of see where people are coming from on their take of why they didn't like this one because it was all the matches. I could kind of see if you did it like an 8-man tournament instead. You could have put more people on the card and everything like that. But I still enjoyed the card. I think you still had some cool, tournament matches and everything like that. Again, I just feel like it was just a lot of people in the tournament.
Yeah, there were.
The Battle Royale, I noticed that there's the Battle Royale on the card that was not listed in the other 2. Was this like the start of where the Royal Rumble would come up before the WrestleMania?
I don't think so.
This was more so
because I didn't know.
The Battle Royal, that was for the
was for a trophy.
I think just for a trophy.
I was just curious.
I think that was just to get people on the card.
That's right.
And that was kind of also where you saw like the born of the whole Bret Hart getting fans behind him.
Yes.
Because people were cheering when he destroyed that trophy in front of Bad News Brown.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I thought it was cool that was pretty much like the precursor to what we got with the Andre the Giant memorial battles that we get now. So
Cool.
Get everybody on the show, get everybody a payday.
Yeah,
Right.
no, I was just checking. I was like, I didn't see any battle royale on any of the other cards.
There actually was one at WrestleMania 2. There was one at WrestleMania 2 in Chicago where they had some NFL players involved as well. There were some wrestlers and some football players. Again, just to kind of get a rub from, some NFL players. And the NFL players just looked like total jabronis. But they did it.
Cool.
And this, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed remembering watching WrestleMania 4 and be like, you know what, the tournament's kind of a cool thing. I kind of enjoy it. Before we move on to WrestleMania 5, do we have tidbits for WrestleMania 4 there, Amer?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I mentioned, I think you had dropped out for a moment, but Randy Savage actually went, and so did Elizabeth, went back and changed outfits for every time that they came out. That's why they needed kind of these breaks during the show. One thing I had heard, and I think Bruce definitely mentioned this, and I think somebody else also mentioned it. One problem with the tournament was it's like, okay, here's Savage's music. Okay, but we've already heard it, right? And so for 4 times, the guy's making an entrance. By the time at the 4th entrance, it's like, okay, we've already seen you 3 times, And it doesn't matter how much you love the guy, but, it's the first pop that really kind of matters, right? That's also a bit of a difficulty for a tournament at a live event when a guy's going to come out multiple times like that. The booking is actually interesting because there were questions asked, I remember in one podcast, about, why wouldn't you have Steamboat versus Savage? You could have, the way that the tournament booking was. You could have had Steamboat versus Savage Part 2. But the way that it was done and the way the matches went, they wanted to really establish Randy Savage as a top babyface, right on par with Hulk Hogan. So they had to make sure that he had heels at every single stage. And that's why we had some double countouts and double disqualifications to make sure that Randy Savage is just beating heel after heel after heel.
That's great. I love it.
If somebody looks at the bracket,
tidbit there.
Yeah, and that also is like, and you'll probably see this if you watch WWF Network. You see that famous spot with Andre choking Bob Uecker. Bob Uecker was, the backstage host and interviewer, and he spent the whole show basically looking for Vanna White from Wheel of Fortune because she was the one who was kind of like adjusting the tournament brackets, like kind of doing her Wheel of Fortune thing there, which was fun.
Great tidbits.
No women's not here either, actually. We only had Elizabeth, and we had Sherry Martel as Peggy Sue in the match, Brutus Beefcake and the Honky Tonk Man.
Yeah, and now we move on to the final WrestleMania for tonight. That's WrestleMania 5. This was presented at the same location, the Boardwalk Arena. Again, and this is basically the explosion of the Mega Powers. They did the whole year's storyline of, Hogan and Macho Man, pretty much coming to blows, and it was over Elizabeth, whatever. And then they pretty much had that story. But WrestleMania 5, I think that's where they got back on track of not having too many like filler stuff. You kind of had matches that had good stories. And you had some really longer matches in this card. I think one of the shorter matches, I believe, was Dino Bravo versus Ronnie Garvin, was one of the shortest matches on the card, including, the shortest one was Red Rooster. The Red Rooster, or as everybody likes to remember him for actually who he was, Terry Taylor, as the Red Rooster. Beat the Bobby Heenan in a singles match in 31 seconds. So, but this pay-per-view was really cool. I thoroughly enjoyed a lot of the matches. Obviously, some good tag matches on there. Another pay-per-view with a lot of tag matches.
Can you guess what I remember from this pay-per-view?
The Brain Busters. I'm going to say the Brain Busters.
Nope.
Okay.
We'll start with you, Brandon. What do you remember from this card?
The return of Rowdy Roddy Piper in Piper's Pit with Brother Love and Walter Downing Jr.
Yes. That's right.
And then Hogan got to pose. Yippee.
And then Hogan left those. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Is there a certain match that you guys enjoyed from this card?
I didn't realize Tully and Arn were on this card, to be honest. Like I said, I hadn't had a chance to look over the match card before.
I'll go through it really, really quick, and I think I know which one Brandon's going to pick because I'm going to pick it too. Hercules defeated King Haku with Bobby Heenan. Bobby Heenan was all over this one. The Twin Towers, Akeem and the Big Boss Man with Slick defeated the Rockers, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. That's actually an underrated match, come to think. Brutus Beefcake versus Ted DiBiase. And
the Gang and Big Bubba were good.
What's that?
I said the Gang and Big Bubba were good. They were very
they were great. Very underrated. Big man tag team. Bushwhackers defeated the Fabulous Rougeaus. And Mr. Perfect defeated the Blue Blazer, Owen Hart. And in not a very great match, as I remember, you'd think Kurt Hennig and Owen Hart not having a good match. Maybe they just didn't get enough time. I don't know what. But yeah. Demolition defeated the Powers of Pain, Warlord and Barbarian. And Dino Bravo defeated Ronnie Garvin. I remember that match with everybody cheering USA. It's like you're cheering USA for two guys from Montreal. I love it.
Yep.
The Brainbusters defeated Strike Force. So Arn and Tully against Tito Santana and Rick Martel. Oh my God, what a great match.
They had great matches. I do.
Oh yeah, that one was fantastic. Go back and watch that one, people. Jake Roberts defeated Andre the Giant by disqualification in a nothing match. The Hart Foundation defeated Greg Valentine and the Honky Tonk Man. They were not Rhythm and Blues yet, but they were getting there. Rick Rude defeated the Ultimate Warrior in a very, very underrated match as well. Singles match for the Intercontinental title.
Yep, I remember that one.
Yep. Bad News Brown defeated Jim Duggan. Well, no, didn't defeat. Versus Jim Duggan, double DQ in a nothing match. Red Rooster versus Bobby Heenan in 31 seconds, which was just to, set us up for the main event, which was Hulk Hogan defeating Randy Savage with Miss Elizabeth in a neutral corner.
And if I remember correctly, Heenan pulled the Warrior's leg to let Rude get the pin on that.
Correct.
One.
Yes, that's that one. Yeah. Would set them up for SummerSlam.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, from that card alone, I mean, there were so many good matches. And again, a lot of tag matches. A lot of good tag matches. Underrated. Again, that Brainbusters versus the Strike Force. Another one. Like I said, I love Tito Santana. So anytime he gets in the ring, and all four of those guys had great chemistry in the ring. Thoroughly enjoyed that match.
I like Tito much better as a tag wrestler than I ever did as a single.
Oh yeah, no, but I love his. I don't know why I liked his moveset. It was just so cool to watch his moveset.
He was so fluid.
He's very fluid, and almost like he didn't have a misstep at all in anything he did.
A lot of this card is why, as a kid, why I hated the WWF.
Why is that?
Well, rugged Ronnie Garvin from the Hands of Stone and former, yes, he was a quick transitional champion to get it back to Flair, but he was presented very well in Crockett in the NWA, which is what I watched. You talk about the Twin Towers, and I'm used to seeing Big Bubba Rogers and the One Man Gang, and now you got you're out there making fun of Dusty with Akeem being the African Dream versus the American Dream. Rick Martel, former AWA World Heavyweight Champion, put in the very, tag team. They were a great tag team, but he was never presented the way he could have been presented. And his promo skills were not that great. So I understand why on the big stage they did what they did with him. Owen Hart is the Blue Blazer. Maybe it was the costume. Maybe, Kurt Hennig, former AWA World Champion, as Mr. Perfect. I like the gimmick, but I just had I was that guy that had a hard time going, why the hell are you renaming this guy? We all know who he is. And maybe we didn't. I mean, it's a lot of people.
He's new to the WWE audience, WWF audience at the time.
And, a lot of people accuse Demolition of being a Road Warrior ripoff. And if you were from the South or you watch Southern wrestling, yeah, I see why you would say that. But a lot of the New York people, when the Road Warriors came in as the LOD or the Powers of Pain came in, they thought they were not LOD, but Demolition ripoffs because Demolition was what they were used to in the first they had ever seen. And the difference in Demolition and LOD and the Powers of Pain was Demolition could actually wrestle. But I also knew that, Smash was, formerly Crusher Khrushchev and Crockett, long hair or not, I recognized the guy, knew who he was. So as a kid, I'm rolling my eyes going, why do y'all keep renaming all these people? But, that was just me.
I think what I liked most about that card, and like I said, I love tag matches, was that WWF Tag Team Championship match was actually a handicap tag match. and they showed how Mr. Fuji trained for it by running the marathon and everything like that. I kind of thoroughly, that goes back to the whole manager being involved in the story and the match, that I loved it, because you never expect someone like a Mr. Fuji to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to get in the ring and wrestle, so I'm going to train for it. Like that, just that whole pre-recorded video of him like joining that race, be like, I got to get my stamina up to be in this match. And he actually looked really good in the ring. Like it was such a fun tag match to watch. Do you guys remember that?
I do now. I'm sorry, I missed it when I was doing the recap. Yeah,
but I will tell you, he was another one as a child when I got to go, see all those people at the Fieldale Collinsville High School gym. Mr. Fuji was another one I met backstage. Very nice man. Didn't speak a lot, but he was very pleasant. As a 7, 8, 9, however old I was, he signed my book, and he shook my hand and kind of gave me the little bit of a bow. And I'm like, oh hey, thank you. So, but I mean, just when you see those guys, that atmosphere, and then you get to watch them on TV. Like I said, that's just where I became the Roddy Piper fan, when he went out there and was getting the hell beat out of him by Wahoo McDaniel, but in the back was just one of the nicest guys you could ever possibly want to meet. And I saw over here in a comment that said Piper should have been world champion. They offered him a lot of different belts, but he knew he would have to lose it, and he said,
"That's it." Yep, 100%. That's what Bruce Prichard has said too. It's like, he doesn't really need a belt. He tells his own stories, right? Just by going out to the ring. And B, if you're going to give him a belt, you got to take it off of him, and that's going to suck.
Yeah, he wasn't going to lay down for nobody. And I love the story that he told up to the day he died, when he won the Intercontinental title. And he said he didn't mind putting it on Brett, but he was like, technically, I still had the offensive hold, and the referee shouldn't have counted, so I won that. I mean, so.
And we only saw 2 title changes on this card. That was Rick Rude winning the Intercontinental title, and obviously Hogan winning the world title. And this pay-per-view was, for me, watching it and looking at it, that kind of set up the next couple of WrestleManias, because in a streak, Hulk Hogan main evented almost every single WrestleMania after that. I mean, even if you count the whole WrestleMania Yokozuna Bret Hart, I mean, at the end, and we'll talk about this on one of the next episodes, comes out and Bret being like, go win the title back, and Hogan wins the title. So this kind of like set up the next couple of WrestleManias as.
Was that 9 or 10 with Yokozuna?
I believe that was 9.
Yeah.
But this pay-per-view kind of set up the whole Hogan's going to win at every pay-per-view now. But
he did win at 6. So
no, he did not win at 6. But he main evented, and so that was kind of like what I took away from this card. And the main event, obviously, probably one of the better. We talk about wrestlers who have good feuds and good matches with a certain person. I think the feud with Randy Savage really, and that match alone, was probably one of Hogan's better matches and better feuds in his career, was with Randy Savage as the break apart for the Mega Powers. And you kind of saw it later on in storylines when the Power Trip, Stone Cold and Triple H had that fallout. So you start seeing that when you see these power teams kind of fall apart. And it kind of started with the Mega Powers exploding on each other and facing each other at WrestleMania. For you guys, do you guys like that story of putting 2 big powered main event wrestlers as a team and kind of build that story of, hey, they're imploding on each other, let's have this as the main event?
If it tells a story of them coming together for a common bond, and then you see the egos break them apart, then yes. But if they just get thrown together for no apparent reason, and 3 weeks later, one stabs the other one in the back, then no.
Let's contrast and compare to what we just saw, a month ago? Compare this to Adam Cole and MJF, right? Very different circumstances, granted, injuries, yes, all of that, right? But you have to make a story out of it for it to make sense.
I love Adam Cole. I do. I've been disappointed so far with his AEW run. A lot of it's injury wise. A lot of it, to me, he looks like he has not been in the gym since he left NXT. But him injuring his ankle really hampered that story for me, because we all knew it was going to be Adam Cole, but with him being injured, it just let the air out of the room. I mean, he wasn't able to super kick him. He wasn't able to do anything. Yeah. And at the end of the day, Wardlow's just, I want the man to succeed. I like Wardlow, but he's not very entertaining. The whole roundabout with that was supposed to be Adam Cole and MJF, and this, I get injuries happen, but it kind of brought it down for me.
Right.
But the
Siren,
story, and I know everybody else wants to talk, but the story, was it? I'd like to hear what you guys have to say. That's probably what you're going to say. Was there as much story around Adam Cole MJF as there was around Hogan Savage?
I don't think so. No,
I don't think so either.
But Siren, you had something to say about the whole Wardlow, and I also like to get your take on putting two main event guys together.
I really enjoyed the MJF Adam Cole, but what I was gonna say about Wardlow is, I feel like that it's not that he's not entertaining per se. I just feel like he hasn't really found his spot. And what they're doing with him right now is silliness. And I hope that it's going to turn into what I think it is. And we've touched on that already. But two main event guys in the same spot. Yeah, and I don't think there was as much build to it. Again, that comes back to content consumption. And how our attention spans work nowadays. Like you see people being like, okay, well, that was too long, or this wasn't long enough. Nobody's ever going to be satisfied. And no. That is the society that we live in right now, is because you have these social media platforms out there where everybody gets to have an opinion. So everybody's opinion matters. And that's where we get into, oh, well, this storyline could have went longer. And then there's other people being like, well, it dragged on way too long. Like, I personally, with the fiery burning passion of 1,000 Suns, hate the Roman Reigns title run. I hate it. But some people love it, and I get that. I'm never gonna judge them for it at all. Like, rock on. You do you like your product the way you like your product. But I really do feel like the whole putting two main event guys together, it works. It does. It has to be done properly. But it totally works. The MJF and Adam Cole line, absolutely freaking phenomenal. If without injury and without mishap, I think it would have went off to be one of the biggest and best storylines pulled off in the last decade to 2 decades of
wrestling. It had the potential.
It really did.
And I do agree. I do feel like, because both those men, MJF in particular, has such a high esteemed respect for history of pro wrestling. MJF eats, sleeps, breathes, loves the whole history of pro wrestling. I mean, how many times he's dropped Roddy Piper's name and stuff. Jake the Snake. He's dropped names. He understands the business. Well, and that story with him and Adam Cole, I felt like came a lot from MJF because it kind of stems from the mega powers to the power trips, to better than you, baby. I think MJF understood that, and I think Adam Cole understood that. They're like, we can make this magic like the mega powers, like power trips. We can make our own mega duo here and kind of run away with it. And I feel like that's what they did. And again, the injury hampered Adam Cole to where we could have saw more of it, and we could have followed more of the story.
I would have eaten that up for the next 6 months to a year if it was presented to me properly.
Let me play devil's advocate on this one to all three of you. Now, do you think it fell flat because of injury alone, or it fell flat because the injury happened and Tony Khan's inexperience in booking could not make up for that injury in a story?
I agree with you 100%.
150%. But because of the injury and the lack of experience with the storytelling and the booking, I do feel like it fell flat. But I mean, at the same time, you got like 1.5 billion wrestling minds back there. What's everybody doing?
They're not getting into Tony's ears, I'll tell you that.
That's unfortunate. Utilize these big, beautiful brains that you got back there, because you got some insanely talented wrestling minds at working for AEW. And I just, like, my biggest thing when they brought in Adam Copeland was he is a super, super detail oriented man, and I think that, and just. I'm wearing my Mercedes Monet. That announcement that they had for the big business, people pointed out in the back it said Boston with the BOSS with the cash signs. $10 says that was Adam Copeland being like, here's like, put this little, because he's very, detail oriented, not what people necessarily are saying, but what people see. Very slight, things to lead the eye and stuff. And so I was really hoping to see more of that kind of stuff. And I think that we will get to see more of that as we go on. But I do hope that they utilize the wrestling minds, because I feel like it was because of poor booking, and because they could have saved it. They could have done so much with that storyline. Yes,
I'll
Adam?
say this for the interviews that I've heard from Jake Roberts, Arn Anderson, and Tully Blanchard, just to name a few, they've all said about the same thing, and that every time they tried to give advice, nobody wanted to listen. Tully Blanchard did say in an interview that MJF liked to pick his brain whenever he had a chance. But everybody else, just if he tried to give him advice, say, hey, why don't you try X instead of Y? That everybody just kind of, especially Adam, yes, him, would just kind of stub his nose up and walk away. And that goes back to, I hate to feel like I'm picking on Tony Khan, but for Tony Khan, he's go, hey, I hired these guys for a reason. We're here to, know things aren't the way they were when they wrestled, but they still know the business. I brought them in here to make a difference. They're going to tell you something, sit down and listen. And
let's look at some of the creative that we have in pro wrestling today. You look at the WWE stand. Look at some of those producers. Shane Helms, Jason Jordan. You have Chris Parks, formerly Abyss. You have wrestlers helping with creative, making these stories happen on TV in the ears of their creative content person, which is Paul Levesque. Okay, that's them being like, here's our matches set up. Here's our segment set up for you. Let's go over this.
And you've also got William Regal back. Don't forget Regal.
Exactly. Now you look at AEW. They got Daniel Bryan now kind of feeding into some creative stuff. Now, like Siren said, you got Adam Copeland over there who's probably feeding into some creative stuff. You need these guys that are former wrestlers. They're not businessmen, but they're former wrestlers, still wrestlers today, that have that creative idea in Tony Khan's ear. Tony Khan does not have that creative team that WWE has. Even TNA, which I'm still upset they fired Scott D'Amore because he did so well.
Happened there?
Yeah, he brought that company back to relevancy over the last couple of years, and I've been loving it ever since.
Well, that's
once Scott D'Amore took over creative and as a director, I was like, I'm in.
I sent that tweet out. I said, Tony Khan, hire somebody that can actually make a difference. Make Scott D'Amore all elite.
That's what I was going to say. I said, now Scott's gone. What not to say they bring him over to AEW and he builds that up story-wise. He created so many good stories, so much good content. Bringing back the old days of TNA, that's what we need as AEW fans. We need the older AEW days. Granted, it's only 5 years old, but we want the beginning of AEW. We want the matches and the stories that we fell in love with that fell flat now. So that's what we got to look at creatively. And when we talk about that, we talk about some of the stuff even with these WrestleMania matches, these cards. Back then, it was just guys fighting, jockeying for position on the card, and even someone like Hulk Hogan using his ego, being like, I need to be here, because he was a main attraction. But where I'm going with this is creatively, you have to make sure you are set with your product. Otherwise, it just becomes stale. Like Siren said, some people are already over the Roman Reigns title run. Some people still love it. That's their cup of tea. Some people are over in AEW, like myself. I'm over this Don Callis versus Chris Jericho storyline. I don't want to see it anymore. It's overdone. There's nothing going on with it. Move to something else. There's me and TNA going, cool, we've got Nick Namath over there now being put in the world title picture scene, but now you've got other guys in there that have been in there, like a Moose, like an Jason Alexander. Did I say Jason Alexander? Josh Alexander, not the actor Jason Alexander. Josh Alexander, the wrestler. I know, but you know what I'm saying? You've got stories going on that you need to see with that. So that's what I say with creative on that.
Yeah.
Well, I saw where Moose tweeted out that Scott D'Amore was the only reason he chose TNA to stay over AEW.
I bet a lot. Gordon Grace, a lot of people are saying stuff like that.
But you talking the Roman Reigns storyline, I was really into it for about the first year and a half to 2 years. Bringing in the Usos, having the different matches with Jay and Roman, and the last year has definitely gotten stale. Yeah. I will say that. And as far as Hogan goes, my favorite match he ever did, and according to him, he was the only one that told him that he would not get booed in Canada. He kept saying that he was still a god in Canada. They were not going to boo him. but putting him up against The Rock, and the crowd took over that show. And
I was there. Me and my mom, we were the only two people cheering The Rock in the entire Sky.
Yeah, like I said, the crowd took over that match, and to Hogan and The Rock's credit, they didn't flinch. They went with it and kind of changed up what they were supposed to do. And as far as Hogan matches go, that's probably the only one I can ever stomach.
Speaking of Hogan, just to kind of bring it back to WrestleMania 5, and what we were talking about, everything we're talking about, like, we're all wrestling fans to the point where story sometimes may not be so important for us. And maybe the people who are listening to this podcast live or will listen to it later. Because if I gave you a match, let's say I just gave you a match and said RVD against Tommy Dreamer, you can probably do that match in your head, right? And you could make a story out of it. Well, most casual fans can't. They watch it because they just want to be entertained. Like, who's this guy? Why should I care about this guy? That sort of thing. And the other part of that is that fans are fickle. We are fickle wrestling fans. We really are. And if you think about it, we can talk about Hulkamania back in the 80s, but people literally ate it up. We love Hulk Hogan. We love Hulk Hogan. But after a while, it's like, can't you give us something other than Hogan, right? And so Vince McMahon says, basically, okay, Randy Savage, everybody. And people were all like, okay, well, but where's Hogan? That's what kind of happened, right? And then it's like, okay, well, here's Hogan again. He's your champion, right? And it's like, okay, what else you got, right? It's like, oh gosh, here we go, right? It's like, it's like, all right, you like the Warrior, right? It's like, yeah, and we're getting ahead of ourselves, but you like the Warrior, right? It's like, yeah, we love the Warrior. Okay, here's the Warrior, right? And people are like, what else you got, right? And that's just kind of how it goes. And I can understand, we alluded to WrestleMania 18, so if I can just, kind of wax poetic and go anecdotal for a little bit, I still remember WrestleMania 18 because, Brandon, you may not know this, but I was the IT contractor for WWF Canada from 1999 to 2003. So I worked at least once a week in that office, right? Even during the time of WrestleMania 18 was there. I had a friend there. He was a huge wrestling fan named Sean. He's out in British Columbia now. I still communicate with him on social media. But he got the opportunity around WrestleMania 18 time to pitch some ideas to the creative team, right? They had Friday meetings every week where the head honchos would get into Carl DeMarco's office. He was the president of WWF Canada at the time.
I remember that name.
Yeah, and talk to Vince McMahon. Love Carl. Great guy. Always treated me well. Don't have a bad thing to say about Carl DeMarco, although apparently some other people do. But anyway, Sean came to me because he knew I was a big fan and said, Amber, you got to help me. We got to come up with some ideas. I want to pitch something good. And I remember we spent the whole week sitting there trying to come up with ideas for WrestleMania 18. We did. We came up with a lot of ideas. But I remember thinking, boy, well, okay, even if we get this done, we still got Raw, we still got SmackDown, like we got to do this. And it's like, well, if we do this on the show, people are going to be bored and think, oh my gosh, that kind of sucked, that was boring. Give us something good, right? And this is the thing, that's how we are as fans. Like if there's a setup episode, like there was of Dynamite this week, and it was fantastic, I think. Some people, the ratings are probably not going to reflect it because people are going to look at last week's Dynamite and then make a decision about whether they're going to watch this week's Dynamite. That's how I think it goes. And so the ratings may not reflect how good the show was because fans are that way, and they're like, they want every show to be perfect and then they want the next show to be better. And I look back and I say to myself, I was involved in booking a major wrestling promotion at the absolute lowest level that you could possibly do it and say, I took it seriously. I'm not self-aggrandizing here and saying, oh, I booked WrestleMania 18. No, far from it, right? I threw some ideas out there, but I took it seriously. And I thought to myself, man, the fans make this really, really tough because they expect perfection every show, and then they want the next show to be better. And no matter what you give them, they're going to say, what else you got?
100% comes back to nobody's ever happy. Like, you're never going to make everybody happy. And the worst thing about it is the more people who love you is going to be twice as many people who hate you. And that comes with product and promotion. It's hand in hand. I mean, you're going to have people like, I know people who had never even watched AEW before and were like, I hate it. It's not WWE. I sat them down. I was like, watch this. And they're like, that was pretty good. I'm like, well, yeah, but you hated it because you didn't even watch it. You didn't know. And I feel like there's always going to be those type of people out there, Amer, who even if you give them exactly what they want and the next episode's better, they're still going to tell you it's shit. Yeah. And that's just how it is,
Yeah.
I'm so lucky to be one of those wrestling fans that, like, okay, I'm sure you guys, if you didn't watch it, you should totally watch our Wrestle Dream. I don't know. I don't even remember where MJF lost his title. Yeah. And because I was extremely upset, I absolutely hated Samoa Joe. I was so mad. I'm like the biggest mark in the world when I'm watching wrestling. But then I can come out of that the instant after and be like, damn, that was super awesome. I love Samoa Joe. He put on a phenomenal show. He did exactly what he was supposed to do. Got me the exact reaction that I was supposed to have. I was supposed to hate him. I was supposed to be so mad. And they did it. And that's with everything, though. Like, you get that. Like, you're gonna get, I turned myself off. Here we go. But you're gonna get that. You're gonna get where it's like, even if somebody's out there complaining about it, it doesn't mean that they didn't love it. Like I piss and moan about some things in certain wrestlers all the time, but they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they're doing it well enough that it's affecting my mood, and I think that's awesome. And yeah, you're just always going to have people that are not going to be satisfied.
You're supposed to feel. It's supposed to make you feel.
Yeah,
right?
Brandon,
that's what I say every week whenever I'm watching. Like, why make me care about you? Make me feel something. And I feel that's lacking quite a bit with a lot of the guys in AEW and a lot of the people in WWE.
And sorry, what was that, Brandon?
Feel something.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
And Brandon, I want to get your take on that before we wrap it up here.
Thank you.
What's that?
About the whole the feeling and being connected to the story.
Well, this is what I'll say. We do. People, when they get emotionally invested, she's a good example. When you're emotionally invested in something, and that's kind of where I was with the beginning of the Roman Reigns story because of the family dynamic, having him turn and go with Paul Heyman. And this is where not necessarily emotional, but getting, AEW has a niche audience, and that's great. Yes. They have a very passionate niche audience. Me personally, I'm a pro wrestling fan. I'm going to watch it all, and there's going to be some I like, some I don't. And I'm just going to go about my day. I'm not going to get online and go, oh my God, this sucks so bad, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
But a lot of people do.
They do.
A lot of people do.
And being you had a hand in doing some booking at the lowest level.
Yeah.
This, I want AEW to get more viewers. So we stop seeing the argument online of, they're going to get canceled. They're not going to get renewed. Where I think Tony Khan is missing the boat is he does, like at the beginning, he did not. But now he has signed so many former WWE people that are household names that at 8 and 9 o'clock, when people are flipping the TV, trying to find something to watch, and you'd have to do it for about a good year. And some of the AEW niche audience might get tired of it. But that's, when you're trying to build your business, you're going to piss some people off. Mm-hmm. But at 8 and 9 o'clock, especially when the Big Bang Theory leads into Dynamite with that big audience they have, you make sure you have, and I'm going to use their WWE names for the casual fan purpose, but you make sure that you start off with an Edge or a Christian or a Daniel Bryan or a Dean Ambrose or a Sasha Banks, if that's who's really coming. And, or at 9 o'clock, the top of the hour, when people are flipping through the channels, trying to find something to watch. Oh my God, there's Edge. I hadn't seen him on SmackDown. There he is. Okay, let me see what Edge is doing. And you bring people in that way. And then after that segment, when you've seen the number jump, then you throw some homegrown talent, whether it be an MJF or, the Lucha Brothers or the Young Bucks, the casual audience isn't familiar with. They might have heard their names, but they don't know who they are. And at the end of the day, they really don't, at that moment in time, care. But if they lead in from an Edge or somebody like that, and they come right out hot and heavy instead of Orange Cassidy.
Yeah.
But if you like I said, you might piss off your niche audience for about a year, but guess what? That niche audience is going to keep watching your show because they want to see the Young Bucks. They want to see Adam Page. They want to see what you're doing with Sora Strickland that the WWE couldn't do, because your niche audience also knows the WWE. So they're going to keep watching and hoping you succeed. They might bitch about it online, but they're going to keep watching. And like I said, to me, you get them emotionally involved by bringing them in and introducing the new characters after they've already seen somebody they're familiar with.
Yep.
Right. And I agree. And with that, it's I'll
Oh, yeah,
wrap
we're
it
at
up.
2
and then
hours.
We'll kind of
You're
wrap
fine.
up that. Yeah, I know it's 2 hours, but
You're
some of these
fine.
episodes are going to be long because we got to cover 5 WrestleManias on an episode.
That's very true.
But yeah,
And I
to
talk
wrap
too
that-
much. I'm sorry.
yeah, with that to wrap up the whole feel, I think you guys heard me say it so many times. I'm over the tribalism of professional
Yes.
wrestling. I'm over the whole my company's better than your company. Just be happy these people have jobs and they're entertaining you because these are people too.
Yep.
I mean, the one example I'll make is this, and then I'll wrap it up. Is the whole thing with The Rock's daughter getting death threats? Listen,
Oh, that was ridiculous.
I'm not a big fan. Listen, I'm not a big
Horrible.
fan of The Rock coming in and taking a spotlight, but that doesn't mean you attack someone personally
Correct.
and attack
Wow,
someone's
guys.
family
Especially a
personally.
21,
like that.
22-year-old female that has
That
nothing to do with
comes
it.
down to the WWE fans that are so invested in a story that they invested in this wrestler that they had the heart and soul, and they bring this guy in and they're like, I remember this guy, but he doesn't need to be here, but then take it the step further. And I'm going to say this, it's not AEW people threatening her.
No,
It is a WWE fan base that is very upset with creative pushing Cody to the side.
Yeah.
Now I will say this tonight at the I just read up on it while we were doing the show. It is official. Cody's going to face Roman at WrestleMania, so people can stop complaining. But guaranteed, like you said, Amir, you said, Amer, people are still going to find a reason to complain.
Absolutely.
This goes to the whole tribalism, not even for a promotion, but for wrestlers.
Yeah.
They're tribalism for a certain wrestler too. I'm a big Cody mark, but that's not going to make me go threaten someone's kid because I'm not happy with the booking. I'm just going to be like, it's not a good booking. I don't believe it's right. I'm still a fan of Cody, but wherever he goes, I'll watch what he does. I don't need to attack someone, So that's my take on it.
I agree. If I had time, I'd go back in my social media and say, okay, now that Cody's going to face Roman, are you going to apologize for what you posted? If I had time, I need like a whole week to do that.
Well,
right.
I'll
Siren. Or no, we'll go Brandon, then Siren, and I'll wrap it up.
All right. I'll say a couple things on this. First off, it's just social media. It doesn't have to be wrestling. It can be life in general. People are just going to say things on social media. And a lot of times, I mean, if you do the research, people are just bored and they start trolling. It's nothing personal. They just want to get a rile out of somebody so they can, mess around for an hour or two and then go to sleep and forget all about it. But they don't realize they just, might have sent somebody over the edge and they don't care. But as far as the wrestling goes, I will say this for the people that think WWE does not watch AEW or pay attention. I'm going to give you 3 names: Cody Rhodes, first and foremost, Jade Cargill, Brian Pillman Jr. They have made all 3 of them stars. Now, if you don't watch NXT, you should give it a take because Brian Pillman Jr. coming out as Lexus King. You can laugh at the name change all you want. I'll give him this much. They did explain it. They didn't just put him out there as somebody different. They explained the name change, and they have made all 3 of them look like superstars. That's a message to AEW's young talent going, look what we can do for you that they're not doing over there. They're getting ready to start poaching when contracts come up. So they're very aware. And for anybody that says they're not, and again, I'm going to go back. I'll wrap it up with this. It's wrestling, people. It's entertainment. Get over it.
Siren.
I am one of those people that is a super passionate AEW fan, and I really wish that more people had the mentality that I do, where, again, like I said, I can watch something and fully be invested in the story 150% while I am watching it. But as soon as that is over, I can remove myself from the fictional situation that is happening in front of me and come back to reality and be like, those 2 people just put on a phenomenal show and did their jobs great. And that's it. It's a job. It is a job. It is a show. It is people sending people death threats and stuff. Y'all need to reality check because that is super inappropriate. And y'all might have some serious mental health issues because that is crazy. That is crazy. She had nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with her. And it's a show. It's a show. Wow. It just mind boggles me. Wow.
Right. And again, I'll wrap it up with this. We're wrestling fans. We just love the product that's presented to us. We just prefer one product to the other, but we're not going to bash it. So with that said,
can I say one last thing? I apologize, Adam.
Amer,
one thing I just noticed. Let's get back to reality, and all wrestling fans. I just actually saw this came on my feed. Virgil We were talking about old WrestleManias. Mike Jones. He has reportedly suffered several strokes. Right? Remember, these are human beings. These are real people who have entertained us. Right? And just a dose of reality, people. Please, stay in the real world. Please.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's as entertainers, they entertain us. I'm sorry, they're actors, but they're athletic actors. I'm sorry, that's what they are. They are very talented at what they do. So just enjoy what you watch, and if you want to give the other product a try, please by all means just watch it and everything, and try to avoid dirt sheets about complaining about one show over the other. But with that, I appreciate you guys coming on tonight. We've got a couple more weeks of this.
All elite.
No, thank you, Scott D'Amore. Please come to AEW, help Tony Khan with some creative. We would love it. But I do want to thank Amer. I want to thank Brandon. I want to thank Siren. I want to thank you guys for coming on and having discussions with me. And we're only 5 WrestleManias down, and we've got 35 to go. But like I said, that's why I decided to do 5 per episode, because that's going to bring us down to the number to get us ready for WrestleMania 40.
And the next 4
I want to do some
until the ladder match.
I want to shout out to all our listeners and viewers. Sorry we couldn't get to your comments. We thank you guys for joining us tonight. Jesse, Ethan, I saw you guys comment. Jason, thank you for commenting as well. Make sure you guys hit that like button, subscribe, share this video with all your friends. We are on Spotify. We're on Twitch. We're everywhere. We have live reactions every Wednesday for Dynamite, every Friday for Rampage, and every Saturday for Collision. There are times when we do live reactions to pay-per-views. We just did one for Royal Rumble. We did one for World's End. So we do live reactions as well. We have interviews. Our latest interview is the Blue Meanie. He just recently came on the show. Great interview. Go check it out. We do have a lot more interviews coming up as Connor is prepping them right now. We do have a big one coming up that we're all excited for. Cool. But with that said, I thank you guys all again for coming on. I thank our listeners. And if there's nothing else, as always, good night, guys.
I'll send you pictures from Revolution.
Nice. Oh, here's Connor joining.
He saw my